Another Chance for Love, written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by P.J. Wood. Dedication for the helpers. Chapter 1. Bree stared at the TV in disgust as Robert Miller made a fool of himself yet again. The son of a billionaire and big-shot agent for an ad agency, he couldn't seem to go into a bar without causing a huge fight. And of course, the news loved to follow him through every mess he made for himself. Bree changed the channel, wondering when he would ever grow up. The sound of voices came from the front of the homeless shelter, so she set her pen down and left her office. She shivered as she walked through the kitchen and into the main room. The furnace had been giving them fits again, and with the outside temperature dipping into the single digits, she needed to get it fixed. A small, round young woman came in from the cold, rubbing her arms to get warm. Marianne smiled when she saw Bree. "Hey, how are you?" Bree wrapped her in a hug. "I'm good. I just made some soup so you can get warmed up." "Wonderful, thank you." Marianne set her backpack down on a bed and made her way over to the large pots filled with vegetable soup. The suit she'd rented made her look sharp, but it was so different from the flowing skirts and peasant blouses she normally wore while volunteering at the shelter. "You always know exactly what I need." "I try." Bree dished a few scoops into a bowl and handed it to her. "How'd the interview go?" Marianne shrugged. "We'll see. I didn't know a few of the questions about computers, but I was one of the more qualified." Bree smiled. "It'll happen." Several more people came in shortly after, and Bree busied herself, making sure they had food and a place to sleep. The beds were soon full, and the low hum of voices brought peace to Bree as she watched the group laugh and joke together. Bree went to her office to make a list of groceries she'd need for breakfast the next day, then went through the accounting books. She'd barely scraped by for yet another month, but it was enough. She ran her fingers through her hair and crunched more numbers, trying to figure out where she could cut costs. "Hey, Bree, someone's here who needs to talk to you." An older volunteer, Damon, stood at the door. "Thanks, I'll be right out." She set her pen down and adjusted her ponytail as she left the room, but stopped short when she saw Robert Miller standing in the middle of the chaos. She'd known he was good-looking, but wasn't expecting her heart to stop as his blue eyes met hers. His nice trench coat and designer suit were a stark contrast to what everyone else wore. His expression showed a distaste toward the shelter that angered her. "Can I help you?" Bree just wanted to send him on his way. No reason to let him show his disgust for her patrons. Robert looked over at Bree and gave her a once-over. "You run this place?" Bree forced a smile. "Yes. Do you need a place to stay?" "Hardly. I came to see if there was a way I could help out." He shoved his hands in his pockets and avoided her gaze. The room had gone silent, and everyone's eyes were on him. "I think we're just fine. We don't need any volunteers right now." The words came out harshly, and she swallowed hard. Robert's face fell. "Look, can I talk to you privately?" Bree almost told him no, but Marianne's meaningful glance and the shake of her head told her she should listen. Her mouth was always getting her into trouble. "Fine." The only semi-private place was her office, so she walked back assuming he'd follow. She sat down and gestured for him to take one of the folding chairs she kept in the room in case more people showed up to the shelter. "What do you need?" She raised an eyebrow. "Look, I'm in trouble at work, and I promised to get some help. Or rather, learn to help other people. My friend told me about this place, and I thought since it's called Second Chance Homeless Shelter, I'd be able to make a fresh start here. But if you don't need anything, maybe you know someone who does." The resignation on his face made her hesitate. She'd seen it too often in the people who stayed here. "You'd have to help with cooking or cleaning. That's what the volunteers do while I take care of the rest." Like all the bookwork and making sure her tenants stayed out of trouble while at the shelter. "That sounds easy enough. Are we just feeding those people out there?" Bree shrugged. "We make sure they get food, a bed to sleep in, and clothes if they need them. But just so you know, I won't let people stay here if they're in trouble with the law. I expect that from you too." Robert nodded. "That's my intention. So, we have a deal?" Bree leaned back in her chair studying him. With his curly brown hair and blue eyes, he was drop-dead gorgeous. But with his looks and family background, he brought a lot of attention from the media, something she didn't want. "If we didn't need the help so much, I'd say no. But it's been busier now that winter is here. I'll let you volunteer on one condition: no media. Some of these people are trying to lay low until they can find a better place to work. I need to allow them that privacy. No media, I promise." Robert's face broke into a grin. "I could use a little privacy myself." Bree stood and put her hand out. "Welcome aboard. Just don't do anything stupid." "Of course not." Robert shook her hand, tingles racing up Bree's arm at the contact. "I'll be here first thing tomorrow." "Don't you have work?" Bree searched his face, trying to figure him out. If he was such a big shot, this should be the last place he'd want to be. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "I've been put on a temporary leave. I plan to return as soon as possible. Thanks for this chance." "You're welcome. I'll see you in the morning." Bree followed him out into the main room and stared as he left the shelter. She just hoped she hadn't started something she'd regret later. Murmurs erupted as soon as Robert left, but Bree decided to ignore them and went back to her office to work. A soft knock interrupted her calculations again, and she sighed. "Come in." Mary Ann poked her head into the room with a smile. "Robert Miller? Really?" "Yes, really." Bree wrote down 6 dozen eggs on the grocery list. "Please tell me you're letting him work here." Mary Ann sat down in the chair that Robert had been sitting in a few minutes before. Bree sighed and dropped her pen on the desk. "Yes, but I think it's a bad idea. He's in the news every other day. That just means he'll get the word out that we're here." Mary Ann rested her legs on a pile of boxes in the corner. "I don't think that's the kind of publicity we want." Bree folded the list into fourths and stuck it in the side pocket of her purse. "I'd better get going. Are you good for the night?" "Most of our troublemakers aren't here tonight, so I should be fine." Mary Ann paused. "You know, this is one more reason that it'll be nice to have another guy working here." Bree laughed and pulled on her coat. "I know, you're right. I'm giving him a chance, but one mistake." Mary Ann shook her head. "Look, the way I see it, this man is in need of your help just as much as anyone else in this shelter. Except that he gets to go home to a nice apartment that probably has a fireplace in every room that he doesn't even use because he has central heating. Meanwhile, we're freezing." The repair guy didn't come by again. Bree shook her head in disgust. Mary Ann frowned. Sounds like it's time to find another repairman. Now go. It's supposed to snow tonight, and I don't want you stuck out there." Bree zipped up her jacket and opened the office door. "All the repairmen are too busy. I called a dozen of them today, and the soonest anyone can come is next week." "Figures." Mary Ann followed Bree out and locked the door. Too many break-ins had taught them to install a few deadbolts so it wouldn't happen again. The chatter was quiet as Bree walked down the row of beds to leave the shelter. Most of the residents were already settled in for the night, but a few talked on their phones or read whatever magazine they could get their hands on. She called out a good night and left. An icy blast hit Bree, nearly taking her breath away. Small flakes fell, adding to her worry. If they didn't get the heater fixed soon, the people would freeze. Bree escaped the cold and slipped into the grocery store a few doors down. The manager waved to her and finished a conversation with a customer before heading over. Joe was one of Bree's favorite people and had a heart of gold. "Hey, pretty lady, what can I do for you?" He took an order form from off the counter. "Besides finding me a new furnace, I added some supplies onto what I normally buy." Bree pulled the list out of her purse and handed it to him. "Did you get any donations today?" Joe pointed over his shoulder using his pen. "We got several bags of clothes, and a scout drive just dropped off several bags of canned food. Hopefully you can do something with 50 cans of tomato sauce and 20 jars of peanut butter." "You'd be surprised," Bree laughed. "I'm going to grab a few things for myself and then be back to sign the form. Is that okay?" "I'll have it ready for you." He nodded absent-mindedly as he filled out the order. "Oh, and we also have a few boxes of outdated food ready for you as well." "Perfect, thanks." Bree grabbed a basket and went through the store, checking the sales in case something looked good for the shelter. It was how shopping trips usually went. She'd go to the store to buy herself some milk and end up buying a whole week's worth of food for the shelter based on the sales. "Oh, hey, it's Bree, right?" It was Robert Miller, in her store. He had his own basket filled with fruit and a few instant meals. "Hi, what are you doing here?" She cringed. "Sorry, that's not what I meant. Obviously, you're shopping. But I've never seen you shop at this store before." Robert picked up a loaf of bread and set it in his basket. "I don't usually come in here, but I was in the area and figured I'd grab a few things before heading home." "I see we have the same taste in hot chocolate. And is that a frozen chicken dinner?" Bree cringed. She sounded like a stalker, mentioning things in his basket. Put her in a shelter where she could help people and she was fine. Put her with a hot guy in a grocery store and she couldn't carry on a conversation. Robert laughed, his eyes dancing. "Yeah, I tend to eat these when I get home late from work. As for the hot chocolate, it's my favorite." "Mine too." "Well, I'll see you in the morning." Bree turned and walked away, hoping he wouldn't try to follow. His perfect blue eyes and smile were enough to make her melt, and she didn't want to allow him into her life, even if he made her stomach flip with excitement every time they talked. She finished her shopping and went back over to the customer service desk where Joe sat. "I'm starting around 6 in the morning. Does that work for you? You're the first stop. I'll make sure they grab all of the donations as well." He waited for Bree to sign the paper, then separated the pink slip from it. "Perfect. You're the best." Bree grinned and took the other slip to put in her purse, then picked up her bags and left the store. Snow fell and had already blanketed the sidewalks in the short time she'd been inside. Bree hurried down the 2 blocks to her apartment, careful not to slip on the wet sidewalk. The fluorescent lights flickered in the entryway, welcoming Bree home. She pushed the button to the elevator, thankful that it had been fixed while she was at work. Stairs were not something she wanted to deal with right then. The small studio apartment was nice and warm when Bree stepped inside. She started a can of soup on the stove, then poured it into a bowl and sat on her couch. That was her routine every night: dinner and then the news before bed. While the news droned on in the background, Bree finished her soup and pulled out the newspaper she'd grabbed from the store. The phone book and online search had failed her in finding someone to fix the furnace, so it was time to look in the classifieds. Bree rolled her eyes when she saw Robert's face splashed across the front page of the newspaper. She was probably crazy letting him volunteer, but Marianne was right. They did need more males working there, and she could use all the help she could get, especially in the winter season. She circled the names of several repairmen in the classifieds, then searched through the rest of the ads to find other supplies they might need: beds, a few items for the kitchen. It was too late to call tonight, but she'd do it in the morning after the breakfast rush. She just hoped she could get the heat working and the grant to come in, or she'd have to shut down the shelter. Most of the people who frequented her shelter had become dear friends, and the thought of no longer being able to help them broke her heart. Chapter 2. Robert watched Bree leave the grocery store and shook his head. She'd obviously heard of him before, and it was going to take a lot to prove to her that he was more than what the media made him out to be. The other guy at the bar had started the fight, but because Robert was there, he was the center of attention. He paid for his groceries and pulled up the collar on his thick Montclair Cluny parka, then left the store. His car was around the corner at a large parking garage, protected from the snow that was now falling heavier. It was a relief to get out of the cold as he climbed in his old beat-up Honda Accord. Soon, he would have the BMW he wanted, but for now, this worked fine. His apartment wasn't too far from the shelter, but it still took a while to get there because of the snowy roads. He pulled his groceries out of the back seat and climbed onto the elevator up to his penthouse. Robert hung his keys next to the door and walked into the kitchen. The furnishings were sparse, but he preferred it that way. He was picky with his art and wanted to find just the right pieces. Once he had those, he would furnish the rest of the apartment to match them. He put all the groceries away, then made himself the frozen chicken dinner and a drink, and sat down at his computer. If he was going to prove that he wasn't the loser the media made him out to be, he needed something to wow his clients. Doing service would help, but he wanted to prove to them that he was up to the challenge of making their product sell, once he was off leave. Snow blew past the windows as Robert stared outside for inspiration. He was supposed to be helping out a law firm, which was rather ironic considering the position he was in now. They'd offered to get him out of trouble if he'd help raise their revenue, so he was willing to give it a try. After drafting some ideas for ski injury or auto accident lawsuits, he shut his laptop. None of these were original ideas, and he needed something original. Robert stood and stared out at the city. Central Park was nearby, and he could just make out the lights. He would have to take a walk through the park tomorrow after working at the shelter. He loved how the snow clung to the branches. There was a certain magic to it. For now, he needed to get back to work, so he'd have something to show his boss. His job at Silver Script Ad Agency had been his life, and he was determined to get it back again. Robert checked for his keys and wallet before leaving his apartment. He'd overslept because his alarm hadn't gone off, which was the worst thing he could have done on his first day. He could almost see the disappointment in Bree's eyes. Those beautiful green eyes. He didn't have time to allow his car to warm up and then try to find a parking space, so he decided to walk. It was cold and icy, but it wasn't far. After a quick stop at his favorite food truck for waffles and coffee, he headed toward the shelter. A long line of people threaded out through the door, and Robert had to squeeze past them to get inside. It was chilly in the main room, making him wonder what was going on with the heating. He'd have to ask Bree when breakfast was over. That was, unless she threw him out before he ever started. Bree glared at him as he made his way to the front of the line. "You're late." "I know, I'm sorry. My alarm didn't go off." He held up the bags of food and the 2 coffees. "Hungry?" "Yes, but I don't eat until everyone else is finished." Bree gestured toward the office. "Set them in there, wash up, grab some gloves and a hairnet, and get out here. We're swamped." Robert nodded and did as she asked, making a note to buy some bigger gloves before the next meal. He'd be lucky if these lasted through this one before breaking. Bree handed him a large serving spoon. "You're in charge of the hash browns. 1 scoop is all they get, even if they try to butter you up." "Got it." Robert scooped some up and set it on the plate an older man was holding out. "Here you go." The man smiled. "Thank you, sir." Soon the faces became a blur as they went past. He listened as Bree greeted most of them by name. Some of the people joked back and forth, while others stayed quiet as they went through the line. A few children were there with their parents, and the looks in their eyes seemed older than a child should. By the time they finished, Robert's back and arms ached. He tried to stay active in the gym near his apartment, but just standing in one place had tired him out. One volunteer took the serving dishes into the kitchen to wash, and Robert dropped into a chair. "What are you doing?" Bree stood in front of him, arms folded. "Resting." Robert could tell immediately that was the wrong answer, but he needed to take a break. Bree dropped an apron and gloves on his lap. "Nice try. Dishes need to be done, and we have to start on lunch." Even when she was angry, Robert couldn't help admiring her beauty. Her long blonde hair still had perfect waves after being in a hairnet. "Sorry, I just needed to sit for a minute." He took the gloves and apron and walked back to the kitchen. 2 other people stood next to the sink, washing the bowls and serving trays. One lady smiled at him before glancing at Bree and turning back to the dish in her hands. "Robert, this is Mary Ann and Olivia. Mary Ann is one of my head volunteers, and Olivia comes in between college classes. Nice to meet you both." Robert turned to Bree. "Where do you need me?" Bree pursed her lips as she glanced around the kitchen. "These 2 have dishes under control. You can help me with lunch. Ever made mashed potatoes before?" Robert bit back a laugh. His mother had insisted he learn to cook before he graduated from high school. He grabbed a potato and tossed it in the air, then caught it. "Yes, I have." "Great. I'll work on something else then." She didn't move from where she stood until Robert started peeling. The only sounds in the kitchen came from the dishes in the sink and the peeling and chopping sound as he went through the bags of potatoes she'd left for him to do. He hummed to himself, smiling when Bree rolled her eyes. The noise helped him concentrate on what he was doing. When he switched songs, Mary Ann joined in with the words, and Olivia giggled. He slid the last of the potatoes into the pot and took it over to the sink to fill. As he waited for it, he took Mary Ann by the hand and around her waist, then spun her in a circle. He stopped at the glare from Bree, but winked at Mary Ann before pulling the heavy cast-iron pot out of the sink. Once it was on the stove, he turned back to Bree. "Have you had breakfast yet?" I haven't had time. She continued to bread the chicken in front of her. Look, I already ate on the way here. Your food is sitting in the office. You go eat, and I'll finish up. He took the knife from her and pulled her away from the counter. Go. Bree opened her mouth to argue, but nodded instead. Thank you. Robert waited for her to wash her hands, then washed his. He grabbed a towel and caught Marianne and Olivia staring. What? We haven't seen Bree take a break during a meal prep for months. Maybe even a year. How'd you do that? Marianne leaned against the counter. You just have to bribe her with the best waffles in New York City. Robert dipped a piece of chicken into egg and then the breading. Is it always this chilly in here? Marianne sighed. We've been having issues with our furnace all winter, and our repairman keeps canceling. That's ridiculous. I'll take a look after I'm done here, and if I can't fix it, I know a guy. Robert set the chicken in the pan and moved on to the next piece. That would be amazing if you could. I haven't been warm for weeks now. Marianne dried the last pot and set it on the shelf. If you're good here, I'll check on the beds. Some people will stay, but I need to change the other ones. Olivia can help you with the last of the preparations before she heads to school. Olivia's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything as Marianne left the room. She turned away and grabbed some cans of fruit and several boxes of pudding. I don't bite, you know. Robert finished the last of the chicken and pulled off his gloves. Oh, sorry. I've seen you on the news and wasn't expecting you to be here. It's just... She paused and took a deep breath. Did you really punch that guy in the bar? Robert chuckled. Yes, but after watching him swear at and try to beat his girlfriend, I'd had enough. When I told him to stop, he threw the first punch. But that's not what the news... Don't believe everything the news tells you. They go for what will be the best story. And thanks to that story, I'm here instead of at my real job. He picked up the tray of chicken. Where does this go? The oven's behind you. Bree's voice made Robert jump. She walked over and opened the door, scowling at Robert as he set the pan inside. If you don't want to be here, you can leave. I can deal with the rest. Robert finished putting the other pans in before answering. You know that's not what I said. Now where's the furnace? Bree raised an eyebrow. You know how to fix furnaces? I've fixed a couple over the years. Just show me where it is. Robert washed his hands and dried them on the towel next to the sink. It's in the back room. Bree grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. Icy, cold air met them as they walked into the small storage room. Stains from past leaks marred the walls, and an old, rusty furnace sat in the corner. It's not much, and we really just need to get a new one, but the grant doesn't renew until the beginning of the year. Robert crouched down next to the furnace and rubbed the rust off the panel. I'm pretty sure this furnace is older than both of us put together. So you can't fix it? I didn't say that either. He pulled off the front panel and checked to make sure the pilot light was on. After he inspected that, the filter, and the wiring, he was sure it wasn't the furnace itself. Your furnace is fine, but it's obviously not doing its job. Where's the thermostat? Bree showed him where the old thermostat was attached to the wall. The numbers had faded enough that they couldn't be read. Has anyone else checked this? He moved the arm up and down, but it didn't turn the furnace on or off with the change. They insist it's fine and tell me I need a whole new furnace. Bree glanced over as a group of people came in to find a place to sleep, then turned back to face Robert. Do you think this could be the problem? Robert pulled the plate off the front and frowned. This looks like it's gotten wet. Did you have a leak over here? We've had leaks everywhere at one point or another. We had to close this summer to fix the ceiling. Bree studied the mechanism. They insist that they checked it. He pointed out a few places, aware of how close she stood next to him. See this and this spot? I'm pretty sure they're fried. You need a new one. Bree frowned. Great. I don't have the budget to buy a new one right now. I guess I'll have to scrounge for even more space heaters and hope they don't kill the electric bill. Those won't help. I mean, they will, but you need to get this fixed. Just the cost of the repairman will cost more than repairing the thermostat right now. And with the way these wires were damaged, it could turn into a fire hazard. He took a screwdriver from the toolbox and loosened the screws so he could see more of the wiring. Look, the wiring needs to be replaced here too. And you can do that? Robert reattached the plate. I can't, but I know someone who can. I'll text him right now. You can't let people sleep here if it's this cold. But I told you I can't pay for it right now. Don't worry about it. Austin's a good guy. He does repairs for friends all the time. He'll make sure you have what you need. Robert screwed the plate back into place and reattached the thermostat. For now, we should probably pull out space heaters if you have them. The weather is only supposed to get worse. Bree's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away. Thank you. I'll make this up to you. Just trying to help. Robert pulled his phone out of his pocket and sent a quick text to Austin, his best friend from high school. Robert had ridden along a few times with Austin for repair trips, so he knew enough to troubleshoot and to do minor fixes. He stuck the phone back in his pocket and headed for the door. Where are you going? Bree asked. Lunch? He turned. I'm allowed lunch, right? Bree opened her mouth to say something, but finally just shook her head. Be back in an hour. Robert waved and left the shelter, shivering in the icy wind. Maybe he should have waited for lunch there, but he couldn't bring himself to eat the food that should go to those who needed it more than he did. Having Bree tear up because of a simple text made him shake his head. Anyone would do the decent thing and help them out, right? Still, it felt good knowing that he'd made that much of a difference. He took the subway to Silver Script Ad Agency and waved at the secretary as he walked past her. A few of the other employees gave him curious looks as they waited for the elevator to their floor. He hadn't exactly gone quietly when they put him on leave. Conversation stopped as he walked past, but he ignored his coworkers and went straight to Deborah's office, where he knocked on the door. It's open. Deborah raised her eyebrows when Robert slipped in. What are you doing here? I thought you were on leave. I am, and I'm going as soon as I talk to you. Robert closed the door behind him, then sat in the chair Deborah offered. I wanted to come and apologize. I just started volunteering at a homeless shelter, and I'm trying to lay low. Deborah tapped her pen on her desk. You realize you've been there for what? A day? You can't expect me to be impressed when you haven't given me a reason to believe that you've changed. I know, and I'm going to stick with this. I think I can help them. We already figured out how to fix the heat, and I'm pretty sure we can make a few other changes as well. Robert was surprised at the excitement he felt at the thought of fixing things up at the shelter. That's good to hear. Deborah studied him for a moment. Report back to me in a week, and we can go from there. You're a great agent, and I'd really hate to lose you. Robert stood. I can live with that. If every day is like what it's been so far today, I'll be too exhausted to go out and party. I like the sound of that. Good luck, Robert. I look forward to hearing how it went. Deborah turned back to her computer, and Robert left the room. Robert caught a few quick glances from employees nearby as he left. He'd proved to them that he wasn't the loose cannon everyone expected him to be. He checked his watch and sped up as he walked back to the shelter. Lunch would be starting soon, and he was a few subway stops away. Austin had texted while Robert was in the meeting with Deborah. He could head over later that night, but needed some measurements and numbers first, so he could pick up the right thermostat. Robert texted back, letting him know he'd send the numbers, and climbed on the waiting train. The line in front of the shelter was just as long as it had been for breakfast when Robert arrived. He ignored the irritated look from Bree and grabbed an apron, gloves, and hairnet. Olivia was gone, but 2 other people had shown up in her place. Robert dished out potatoes for the man in front of him and studied the line of people waiting for their food. There were people he recognized from that morning, but many were new faces as well. Bree continued to talk to each of them, but Robert couldn't bring himself to do it. He had nothing in common with these people, and they weren't really his clients, so he couldn't just fake his way through a conversation. At least he wasn't the only one who kept quiet. The 2 volunteers he hadn't met yet kept their eyes down and only spoke if the patron had a specific question about what they were serving. "Hey, haven't I seen you somewhere before?" The young man's voice knocked Robert out of his thoughts. "I don't think so." Robert dropped a spoonful of potatoes onto his plate, hoping he'd move on. The man squinted and suddenly brightened. "I do know you. I've seen you in the news lately. Robert something, right?" "Yes, Robert. Can you move on? You're holding up the line." Robert didn't mean to snap, but he hated that he couldn't escape the recognition. It was just a stupid bar fight. "Oh man, I knew it was you. Wait till I tell my friends." He laughed as he continued down the line. Bree stared over at Robert with wide eyes, and he knew exactly what she was thinking. If this young man told his friends, it could escalate until it was all over the news. She wiped her hands and walked over to Robert. "Hey, can you go wash the lunch dishes? I want to get them going so we can start on dinner." "Sure." Robert walked back to the kitchen and used the sprayer to clean off the food before putting the pot into the washer. He'd probably have to stay back here from now on, which was fine with him. It was a messier job, but at least he wouldn't have to work with the people all day. Chapter 3. Bree blew out her breath as she watched Robert go into the kitchen. Having him at the shelter was like having a walking time bomb. At some point, someone would spill the beans, and this place would be crawling with reporters. "Hey, Bree, pay attention," Marianne whispered. With a jolt, Bree realized she was holding a chicken breast over a man's tray. "I'm sorry, here you go." The man rolled his eyes and moved down the line. Bree pushed thoughts of Robert away. He was only a distraction. An incredibly good-looking distraction. Bree served the next man. "Hey, Matt, how's it going? How'd the interview go?" "They said they'd call Monday, but I'm not sure I'll get it. I didn't know some of the answers." Matt shrugged. "It's okay if I don't. I have another interview tomorrow." "That's great. I hope you get one of them." "Thanks. I appreciate the help." Matt moved on, and the next person stepped up. Bree greeted each person with a smile, making sure they felt welcome. A few had questions about where they could sleep or shower, while others just simply said hi and moved on. This was one of her favorite parts of running the shelter. As the line thinned and people had settled to eat, Bree stretched her back and took the empty pan to the kitchen. "All done?" Robert leaned against the counter, and his half-smile made her stomach flutter. The sink was empty, waiting for the dishes from lunch. "Yep." Bree set the pan into the sink and pulled off her gloves. "Sorry you got stuck back here, but you don't have to apologize. To be honest, I prefer to be back here." He turned on the faucet to soak the pan. Bree watched as he added soap to the hot water. "Do you get recognized everywhere you go?" "Not really, but with every new story, it gets worse." He picked up the scrubber. "I'm sorry if I caused a problem in there." "I think it's fine." He moved on to get the rest of his food, and no one else seemed to pay any attention. He's not one who comes in often. His parents apparently left one day and never came back. He travels around the city and stays wherever it's convenient. Robert frowned. That's terrible. That's the story of several people who come in here. Parents get to where they just can't take it anymore and leave. Others can't handle living with their parents for another moment. And then there are those who had great jobs, and the economy tanked, sending them packing. You have to have a pretty thick skin to deal with this all day. But I love it. Bree smiled at the thought of the success stories she'd had over the years. People who had gone on to make a name for themselves. Robert finished the pan just as the other volunteers brought in their serving dishes. Bree watched as he turned the water on and started the next one. She pushed up her sleeves and stood next to him. You can go. I'll finish these. She picked up a second rag and waited. I'm already here. Might as well finish. Bree picked up one of the pots and set it in the other side of the sink. Fine. We'll just do it together and get done twice as fast. Robert laughed and continued washing. He'd scooted over just a little to make room for her, but their arms still touched, sending a rush through Bree every time they bumped into each other. So, how long have you done this? He asked. 5 years. I started as a volunteer, and when the owner retired, he signed it over to me. Robert's eyebrows shot up. 5 years? You must have been right out of high school. I was 21 when he signed it over. None of the other volunteers cared enough to stick around, so he gave it to me. I just wished I'd known how little he'd done as far as maintenance. Bree hadn't owned it for more than a month before the pipes sprang a leak. So really, he was just trying to torture you for sticking around. Bree laughed. Mary Ann and my parents say the same thing all the time. Well, I think you're doing a great job with it. I see how happy they are when you call them by name. It's pretty cool. Thank you. That's why I do it. Bree's face burned. Robert nudged her shoulder with his. You did the same thing with me too, you know. What do you mean? Bree set the dish she'd been washing on the counter and started on the next one. You're helping me out like you do the rest. Robert finished his serving dish and dried his hands. How do you want me to help with dinner? Bree nodded toward the fridge. Start with dessert, and I'll make the main dish in a sec. The directions are sitting on top of the pudding boxes over there. Mary Ann came in soon after to start the vegetables. There was a comfortable silence in the kitchen as they all worked on their different sides for dinner. Chatter sounded from out in the main room, something she wasn't used to hearing at this time of day. Everyone was usually out finding jobs, a requirement of the shelter. She loved helping those who came in, but they needed to be actively searching for a new job in order to stay. The weather must have gotten worse if they were still here. Once things were under control in the kitchen, Bree went to check on the bathrooms and changing areas to make sure people had picked up after themselves. A couple of showers had been left on, and someone had dropped their cigarettes on the floor, regardless of the no smoking signs all over the shelter. Bree picked up the cigarettes and threw them in the trash before moving on to the next room. The small room where they kept the changes of clothes for those who had interviews was full of outfits, since no one had gone out in the snow. A few of the white shirts had stains on them, so she took them back to the laundry room and threw them into the washer with some bleach. People could borrow them, but they had to bring them back once they were done. There were other clothes that were donated to the shelter for people to keep, but these were separate. Bree shivered as the air vent came on in the room. It was a good thing Robert had someone coming to look at the heating, because it was only getting worse inside the shelter. Another gift from the previous owner. After checking on the main room to make sure everyone was comfortable, Bree went back to her office to go over the applications of the new people who had come in that day. She'd have to check on a couple because of drug charges, but otherwise she was happy to help them. She slipped the papers into a filing cabinet and stood to check on dinner. As she wandered through the main room, a man came into the shelter with grease on his cheek and a toolbox in his hand. When he saw her staring, he grinned and walked over. "Hey, I'm Austin. I'm looking for the one in charge. Robert Miller said I needed to check out a thermostat." "I'm Bree. I own this place." Bree shook his hand. "Thanks so much for coming." "It's no problem. I'm glad Robert called me." Bree had to turn away as her eyes filled with tears. He was the first repairman to come in with a smile on his face. She said a quick prayer of thanks and went to show him where the thermostat was. Chapter 4. Dinner was in the oven, and while there were still people in the shelter escaping the weather outside, it had quieted down. Robert finished with the last bowl of pudding and put it in the fridge to set. "Your friend is here." Mary Ann stood in the doorway. "Great, thanks." Robert left the kitchen to find Austin and Bree standing in front of the old thermostat. "Hey, man, I wondered when you'd get here." Austin grinned. "Unlike some people, I have to work." Robert laughed and slapped Austin on the back. "Yeah, well, I'll return to the agency soon enough." "I'll believe it when I see it." Austin smirked and unscrewed the thermostat plate, then pulled it off the wall. He frowned at the wires and glanced over at Robert. "You didn't tell me how messed up the wiring was. It's a miracle it didn't start a fire." "That was my thought exactly." Robert watched Bree's face fall. "I'll cover it. Just do what you need to do so we can get some heat in this place." Bree frowned, but didn't say anything as Austin began unhooking everything. Robert helped where he could, but mostly he just stood there watching. When Bree was called away to answer a question, Robert leaned forward. "So, how bad is it really?" he asked. "Pretty bad, but I'm sure we have enough wire here to work with." Austin snipped off the ends and peeled back part of the casing. "Ah, here we go. This part is undamaged. It makes me wonder about the rest of the wiring in this place, though." Robert studied the walls in the surrounding area. "She said everything was replaced recently, so it shouldn't be too bad. But then the contractors should have noticed that this was messed up." "Not necessarily. The other electrician didn't catch this, so the drywallers wouldn't have either." Austin took the new thermostat from off a nearby table and connected the wires. "This shouldn't take much longer, and then I can check out the furnace." "Thanks. I'll go see what else needs to be done, and then I'll be back." Austin shot Robert a sly grin. "What you mean to say is that you need to go talk to the beautiful woman instead of your best friend who you haven't seen in weeks." "Maybe." Robert chuckled as he went to find Bree. He skirted around the beds where people slept and cringed at the coughing from a man who lay curled up in a ball. He was sure the guy had pneumonia by the sound of it. Bree sat in her office, writing in a notebook, and didn't look up when Robert knocked on the open door. Austin should be done with the thermostat soon. Robert waited for an answer, but when he only got a slight wave from her, he turned to go find Mary Ann instead. But the coughing fit from the other room nagged at him. "Has that man been checked out? He sounds pretty bad." "He can't afford health care." Bree finished what she was writing and sat back. "We have people come in when they can, and we're working on becoming part of a community program that offers respite care. But until then, he has to stay out of the cold until we can get our doctor to come back in." Robert cringed again at the sound. Is he always this bad, though? "No, but we should have someone coming in tonight or tomorrow who can take a look at him. Hopefully my friend will get the furnace working, and maybe that will help." Bree stood. "If you're looking for something to do, We got a delivery of clothes and blankets, and I haven't had the chance to go through them yet. We're going to need them tonight, so could you do that for me? Split the clothes up by size and then fold the blankets in another pile." "Okay." Robert took the garbage bags Bree handed him and went out to the bed nearest the office so he could work easier. Several blankets had been donated, some new, and others that were more worn. The clothes came in several sizes, but most were for adults. "Ah, you got the fun job," Mary Ann laughed. Robert set a pair of pants on a pile of women's clothing. "I don't mind it." "That's because this is your first time." Mary Ann took a pile of clothes and set them on a table near the front of the shelter, then came back for another pile. The blankets were to be saved until after dinner. But Robert kept one of them aside, while the rest of the piles were taken to the front. As soon as he was done, he took the blanket and set it over the coughing man. The man opened his eyes and whispered a raspy, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Robert walked away to find Bree and cleared his throat. That had affected him more than he'd expected. It was a simple gesture, but it seemed to make a huge difference for the man. Bree stood leaning against the doorway, smiling. "What's his name?" Robert gestured toward the room behind him. "Paul. He's been here off and on over the years. His family left him about a decade ago, and then the business he'd built from the ground up fell apart. He's tried to find work since then, but with the economy like it is, none of the jobs last long." Bree paused and her eyes lit up. "Do you hear that?" It took a moment for Robert to figure out what she was talking about, and then realize that the furnace hummed in the background. He checked one of the vents and felt the warmth flowing out of it. "It's working." Bree pushed her way past Robert. "Let's make sure all the vents are open. Some of the people shut them because of the cold air that blew through." After they were done, they went over to Austin, who was programming the thermostat. "I can't thank you enough for getting this to work." Bree hugged him tightly and then turned and hugged Robert. "Thank you for calling him." The feel of her in his arms distracted Robert enough that he forgot to answer right away. He let go and took a step back so he could concentrate. "I didn't want you to freeze, and I knew he would be able to do the job." Austin grinned at him over Bree's head before speaking. "Let me show you how to program this before I take off." People began to trickle in for dinner, so Robert walked back to the kitchen to put on his apron. He'd have to call Austin to go out for drinks or something later. The two other volunteers came in to wash their hands and get ready to serve, but they didn't say much to him. He cleared his throat and offered his hand. "Hey, I'm Robert Miller. And you are?" One girl glanced at it before turning away. "Avery." "Don't mind her. She doesn't like talking to strangers. I'm Xander." He handed Robert the towel. "Maybe it's best that you stay back here again." "You're probably right, but until Bree gets over here, you need the help up front." Robert pulled the pans out of the oven and took them to the serving area. He picked up the spatula, but Mary Ann took it from him. "San is right. You're in the back." She turned and smiled at the woman who was first in line. "Hey, Sandra, how was your business today?" Robert listened to Sandra gush about how many flowers she'd sold as he walked to the kitchen and dropped into a chair. He leaned against the wall and stared up at the ceiling while he waited for the first dishes. The paint was peeling and faded, and there were the same stains in here as back in the storage room, indicating old leaks. Robert sat up straight. One of the stains was darker than the others. He grabbed his chair and took it over to the corner to stand on. The ceiling was spongy under his fingers. Another leak. That's the last thing they needed right then. "What are you doing?" Bree's voice made Robert jump, and he almost fell off his chair. "You have a leak." Robert pointed at the dark spot. "Looks like it's a new one." Bree cursed under her breath. Of course. We get one thing fixed and another pops up. Robert climbed down. "Do you have an attic above this?" "No, it's just the roof, and it needs to be fixed. Yet another thing on the list." She washed her hands, then pulled her glove on a little harder than she needed to, and it ripped. Fantastic. "It'll be fine. If you tell me how to get on the roof, I can check it out. It's not like I can do anything until people have eaten anyway." Robert zipped up his coat. Bree studied him before sighing. "The ladder is in the back. Be careful, though. Last I checked, snow was falling pretty heavily." "I'll be fine." Robert went into the storage room and out the back door to find an old ladder on the top of the roof. It had seen better days, but he climbed it anyway, careful of where he stepped. The roof seemed to be in fairly good shape, which was good to see. He walked out onto it, brushing snow away as he went. The problem was obvious once he got over the kitchen. The water tower for the building sat there, and the roof underneath had begun to curl up with moisture. A leak had formed in the water tower, and a small stream had dripped down, causing the problem. The snow and freezing temperatures appeared to be the only thing keeping the tower from dumping everything out. He climbed back down from the roof and went into the storage room, but there was nothing he could use to stop the leak. There was a hardware store a few streets away, and he hoped they'd have what he needed, if they were even still open. Robert poked his head out of the kitchen. "Hey, Bree, I'll be right back. I need to grab a few things." She nodded to show that she'd heard, and Robert took the back way out of the building. Wind whipped around him, making it hard to move fast. He just hoped it was worth the trip. The door jingled as he walked in, the heat instantly washing over him. He wiped his face to dry off the snow that had pelted him as he walked down the sidewalk, and went to find a manager. "Hi, I need something for an emergency repair. The Second Chance homeless shelter, a few blocks away, has a leak in the water tank, and it's destroying the roof below it." Robert smiled at another customer who stared at him. "Do you have any ideas?" "Let's see. You're going to need some thick metal for the tower, but that might do more damage than good with this cold." The manager, whose name tag said Steve, walked over to a section in the store and picked up a box of epoxy and a box of patches. "I'd call someone to come fix it, but for now, you can use this epoxy. Don't worry, it's safe for drinking water. And then this patch over the top. But it needs to be repaired before the ice around the hole melts or the tower can burst." Robert stared at the items in his hand. "Will these hold up in the storm out there?" "Let's hope so. As for the roof, we have tiling and stucco over here, but again, both are fixes for a mild day and not blizzard weather." Steve handed him a heavy bundle of tile. "I'd staple it on, but be prepared for a more permanent fix later." "Thank you." Robert set everything on the counter and pulled out his wallet. So far, this volunteer position was costing him a lot of money, but it needed to be done. Steve handed him a receipt with the cost of the supplies and smiled. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas to you, too." Robert pulled out his card, but Steve held up a hand. "No, I mean the supplies are on us. Consider it a donation to the shelter." Robert stared at him. "Are you sure? You need the money." "Look, I spent a few months going from shelter to shelter, volunteering as a college student. I've seen the good that goes on there, and this is my way of continuing my help. If you need anything else, come back, and we'll see what we can do for you. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." Robert pulled out a business card and handed it to him. "If you ever need help with advertising, call me." Steve smiled. "I'll remember that. Good luck." Robert nodded, scooped up the bags, and rushed back to the shelter. The storm was only getting worse, and he needed to get a patch on the roof and tank. He climbed up the ladder and applied the epoxy the best he could through the frozen metal and wood, and then attempted the patch, but it was too icy. He then dropped to his knees and stapled the tile onto the roof. It wasn't the prettiest repair, but it would hold until the storm passed. He added a few more staples just to be sure, and then climbed down. Dinner had finished by the time he walked into the shelter to warm up. The heat had definitely improved. Instead of everyone wearing their coats inside, many had taken off their winter coats and talked animatedly. Robert put the rest of the tools in the back and went to find Bree. "Hey, I finished the roof the best I can for now. You have a leak in the water tower that needs to be fixed as soon as possible." "Thank you." Bree handed him a cup of soup. "Here you go. You must be freezing." "My fingers are popsicles, but otherwise I'm fine." He pulled out the receipt from the hardware store manager. "Here you go. He said to call if you need anything else." Bree ran her finger down the supplies, and her eyes widened at the cost. "We need to pay you back for this." "No, it was donated." Robert pointed at the amount paid. "He wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas." Bree's jaw dropped. "They can't do that. This is over $100. Robert chuckled. "That's kind of what I said. Anyway, is it okay if I take off? The weather is getting pretty bad out there." "Yes, I was just about to head out myself." Bree took her coat off her chair and slipped it on. "Mind if I walk you home?" Bree paused before answering. "That would be nice." "Great." He waved to Xander and Avery, who were also getting ready to leave, then bent down to hug Mary Ann. "See you in the morning." "See you, sweetie." "And bless you for fixing the furnace. I nearly froze last night." She kissed him on the cheek. Robert laughed. "I'm glad I could help." Bree stood at the front door, reorganizing a few things on the table, when Robert joined her. She finished what she was doing and went through the door, Robert following right behind. "Looks like the blankets are gone." Robert shoved his hands in his pockets. The temperature seemed to have dropped another few degrees in the few minutes he'd been inside. "They always go first in the winter. The coats and gloves are all gone as well." Bree pulled her hat down further on her head as they walked. "Do you mind if we stop at the grocery store on the way? I need to put in an order." "I need some more hot chocolate anyway. I didn't bring my car this morning, and I have a feeling I'm going to need all the warmth I can get when I make it home." "That sounds good. Maybe I'll grab some too." Bree stepped carefully through the snowdrifts, and Robert couldn't help keeping an arm out in case she fell. His boots had good traction, but even then he could feel how icy the sidewalks were. After the third time, he had to catch her. Bree burst out laughing. "This is terrible. I can't even walk out here." Robert joined in as he held her up. This time, as they started walking, he didn't let go. "Maybe we should have just stayed at the shelter." "Probably, but this had to be done." Bree wiped off the snow, knowing it wouldn't do any good, and pulled the grocery store door open. "We made it." While she started the order, Robert went to pick up the couple of things he needed. The powdered hot chocolate was good, but he loved to add creamer and extra dry milk to the mix. He grabbed another box for Bree and went to pay. On the way to the front, he passed several people clearing shelves into their carts, while others argued over who got the last box of cereal or bottles of water. Bree had just finished up and met Robert by the checkout. She seemed troubled as she took the box from him. "What's wrong?" Robert set his things on the belt and took out a handful of bills. "There's a shortage of a few items I need." Bree set her box next to his. Robert frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look around. Usually the store is almost empty by now, but tonight it's packed. People are scared and they're stocking up for the storm." Robert thought back to the people grabbing everything off the shelves. It must have been fear fueling the arguments. "Do you need to order more tonight in case it's worse tomorrow?" Bree sighed. "Maybe. I hate ordering extra since we don't have the space and because the food might spoil, but I need to be able to feed those who come in. Do you mind waiting? I understand if you need to leave." Robert glanced out at the storm and shrugged. "It just means I don't have to go out there yet." "Thanks. This won't take long." Bree went to the desk, and Robert went with her this time. He watched as she went through the list and changed the numbers to order more of each of the items. He suggested a few changes just in case, then watched as she signed her name. A strand of hair had come out of her ponytail, and he resisted the urge to tuck it behind her ear. "I think that's it." Bree handed the paper to the manager. "Let me know if you can't get some of this." "Will do. Thanks." The manager glanced between Bree and Robert, but didn't say anything. "Stay safe out there. It's getting pretty bad." Getting bad was an understatement. The snow blew sideways from the wind and bit into their skin as they made their way to Bree's apartment. She took the bag from Robert as she reached her doorstep. "Thank you for walking me home. I'd invite you in, but I think you'd better get going or you might blow away." Robert chuckled. "I think you're right. I'll see you in the morning." "Hey, Robert. Thank you for everything." She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek and backed up quickly, her eyes wide. She fumbled with the doorknob and hurried inside. Robert stared at the door for a moment before heading toward his apartment. Even with the snow trying to freeze him as he trudged on, his cheek was still warm where her lips had been just moments before. Chapter 5. Bree checked the numbers again, even though she knew the answer would be the same. If the grant didn't go through, she'd be in serious trouble. Having the donated items definitely helped, and she still couldn't believe that Robert had managed to get her heating and roofing fixed for free. Robert, the man she'd been so annoyed with every time she saw him on the news, continued to surprise her. She'd expected a selfish, self-absorbed jerk, but he'd constantly proved her wrong. And then she'd kissed him on the cheek. What was she thinking? It was completely unlike her. She stood to make a pot of hot chocolate and stared at the box Robert had picked out. While the water heated up, she changed into pajamas and turned on the TV to unwind before going to bed. As Bree mixed her hot chocolate, the weather portion of the news started. The reports of snow levels weren't too surprising, and she was glad she didn't have a car, because the roads would be terrible. She just hoped Mary Ann had enough beds available for the night, and that the furnace would hold out. Maybe she should have just stayed at the shelter. The mayor's voice on the news broke into Bree's thoughts. "Must understand the gravity of this situation. We are expecting at least a foot of snow to hit the city, and most likely more. Make sure you have what you need for your homes, and do not leave them. unless it is an absolute emergency. Again, we are expecting record-breaking snowfall, and it is imperative that you stay inside your homes for the next few days. Thank you." Bree set her hot chocolate down on the table and grabbed her phone to text Mary Ann. "Did you see the news?" She waited for a moment before she got a reply. "Yeah, you did get food ordered, right?" "Yes, thankfully. How full is the shelter?" "Packed. Bring more blankets if you can." "Got it. See you in the morning. If I'm not snowed in." Bree finished her hot chocolate and turned off the TV. She had to pack a few things so she could stay at the shelter. True, they could probably survive without her there, but she needed to make sure everything was running properly. She quickly pushed aside the thought of texting Robert. He had helped more than enough in the 2 days he'd volunteered. The church on the corner had been extremely generous with blankets when Bree stopped by to see if they had any donations. Apparently, the older women in the congregation had been stockpiling supplies for months in preparation for winter. With another "thank you," Bree left and struggled down the snow-packed sidewalk to the shelter. If she'd known they had so much available, she would have brought her wagon. It was another 5 blocks to the shelter, and the blankets were heavy. "Let me help you with that." Robert took the large bundle out of Bree's arms, seeming to have appeared out of nowhere. "Where'd you come from?" Bree adjusted the strap of her backpack on her shoulder. "Wisconsin originally, but then we moved here when I was 10. Robert laughed at the expression on Bree's face. "I'm kidding. I was just walking to the shelter and noticed someone carrying a rather large bundle of something, so I came over to help. What is all this?" Bree stared at him for a moment before answering. "Blankets. Why'd you come so early? You didn't need to be here for a few more hours." Robert's breath came out in puffs of frost. "I couldn't sleep. I usually go running first thing, but that obviously wasn't going to happen this morning, although I guess I'm getting my workout after all. I can take them back." Bree held out her arms, but he shook his head. "I'm good." He adjusted the bundle and pushed the traffic light button. "Did you have breakfast already?" Bree shook her head. "I wanted to get down here as soon as possible to make sure they got the whole order from the grocery store, and to grab juice along with things like toilet paper before the other shelters got to them. You know breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right?" Robert waited for Bree to open the door to the shelter. Bree rolled her eyes. "Yes, Dad, I do know that." Robert laughed. "Where do you want these? We can set them down, and then I'll take you out for breakfast." "That sounds good." People were already walking over to see what Bree and Robert had brought in, so she gestured toward the table they'd set the clothes on the day before. "This works. Okay, everyone. I know it's freezing out there, but we have to make sure these blankets go as far as they can, one each." Robert nodded toward Paul. "Is he doing any better?" "I hope so. Mary Ann was pretty worried about him last night." Bree walked over to where Paul lay curled on a cot. She felt his forehead and jerked back. He was burning up. She grabbed her phone and called 911. The small spark of excitement at going to breakfast was quickly squashed as she realized she wouldn't be going anywhere for a while. 911, what's your emergency?" The woman sounded tired, and Bree couldn't blame her. "My name is Bree Matthews. I own the Second Chances homeless shelter. I have someone at my shelter who has a high fever. We were supposed to get a doctor in here yesterday, but they canceled last minute and just sent some cough medicine and painkillers." There was a slight pause. "What is his temperature, ma'am?" "I don't know. My thermometer is in the other room." She watched Mary Ann hurry toward the office. "Someone is going to get it." "Great. While you wait for that, check his heart rate. Is it regular? And how is his appetite?" Bree bent down and checked his pulse. faster than normal, and he hasn't eaten much over the last day or two." Mary Ann handed her the thermometer, and Bree checked that as well. She frowned. "It's 103.4. There was more silence before the woman answered again. "Unfortunately, there's not much we can do right now. The hospitals are full, and with the roads how they are, we're only able to handle the worst of emergencies." Bree stared at her phone for a moment. "Are you kidding me? He could die, and all I get is, sorry, too bad for you?" Robert took the phone from Bree. "Hi, who am I speaking to?" "Sandy? Listen, the guy is in really bad shape. You can't tell us this isn't an emergency. He's He listened for a moment, and Bree could see the fire in his eyes. "No, don't you dare tell me to calm down. You can't treat— Let me talk to your supervisor." Bree tried to take the phone from Robert, but he turned away. "Hi, we have a very sick—" He paused. "No, I will be reporting you." Bree took the phone back, her hand shaking. This was the first time since he'd shown up that she'd seen the temper he was so well known for. "They wouldn't do anything?" "No, this isn't a big enough emergency." Robert cursed under his breath. "I'd take him there myself, but the chill would kill him faster than just lying here. We have a first aid kit in the office. Why don't you go grab him some of the medicine we got yesterday? It's better than nothing, right?" Bree knew she needed to get breakfast started, but with a fever like that, she had to take care of Paul. Robert nodded and headed for the office while Bree went into the kitchen to wash her hands. No need to share germs with the other people. They'd need to move Paul's bed soon, so no one else would get sick. She pulled out the cans of fruit, cartons of milk, and pastries that had been delivered. She knew they'd need more than that, but it was all she could put together before people lined up. The eggs could be saved for tomorrow's breakfast. Once she was sure Mary Ann had things under control, she went to find Robert. "Hey, do you think you and Xander could help move Paul's bed? We also need to put a curtain around him. I hate to do it, but—" Robert nodded, the frustration evident on his face. "Got it. The spread of germs. I'll do that now." He set the supplies on the shelf a little harder than necessary and went to find Xander. Bree stared after him. She should be impressed that he cared so much about Paul. She'd seen his expression the first time he'd helped serve food, like these people were beneath him. Something had changed along the way, but he still seemed to lose his cool easily, and she wasn't sure she could have that here. An argument broke out, and Bree quickly left the room to find Robert and a large black man inches away from each other. "Whoa! Hey, what's going on?" Bree squeezed herself between them. The man shoved his finger into Robert's chest. "He's trying to make me move over. You know this is my spot." Bree set her hand on his arm. "I know it is, Andre, and we need to move you over so we can prevent everyone from getting sick. As soon as Paul is better, you can move back, all right?" Andre clenched his jaw before nodding and backing up. "Sorry." "It's fine. Just go get your breakfast, and I'll make sure your stuff isn't touched, okay?" Bree kept eye contact until he finally nodded and walked away. She turned and faced Robert. "You need to calm down. He doesn't know you or trust you. Yelling only makes things worse." Robert avoided her eyes, but anger emanated from him. "I was just trying to help out. I don't like it when people attack me for no reason. You were going to move his stuff. This is all he has. You'd be defensive too." Bree motioned for Xander to move to the end of the bed. She turned to Robert. "Let's get Paul's bed moved and then you can head home. We're good for the day." "What?" "No, I'll stick around. There are too many people here to deal with by yourself." Robert glared at Andre and turned back to Bree. Bree sighed. "I know you want to be here, but I can't have you losing your cool. Being firm is fine, but getting up in their face like that is not okay." Paul slid out of the bed and sat on the floor, resting his head on his knees. Robert took the other end of Paul's bed and waited for Xander to be ready. They had to lift the cot up and over Andre's bed so it sat in the corner of the room, then waited for Bree to move a few items belonging to other patrons before they could set it back down. Robert helped Paul up and over to his bed. Once he was settled, Robert went into the back room to get his coat. Bree tried to say goodbye, but he didn't look back as he went out into the blizzard. It wasn't how Bree wanted him to leave, but there wasn't much she could do about it. After all, it was because of his temper that he'd made the news countless times over the last several months. She went to find some sheets in the office to hang up around Paul's bed. She hated isolating him, but it would probably be warmer in there than the rest of the shelter. The door jingled, and Bree turned, hoping Robert had come back. But there were 3 new people seeking shelter. She finished pinning up the last corner and walked over to greet them. "Hey, have you been here before?" She reached out to shake their hands. "No, but the other shelters are full." The younger woman spoke while the others seemed to cower behind her. Bree gestured for them to follow her and handed them applications. "This is just so I know a little more about who's staying here. Once you have it filled out, find me, and we'll get you a mat and a blanket. The beds are all taken, unfortunately." The woman looked over the application. "You have showers, right?" "Yes, just to the right of the kitchen. We turn the lights out at 10, but you're welcome to talk afterwards, as long as it's quiet." Bree gave them each a pen, then headed back to the kitchen to see if Mary Ann needed anything. "More people?" Mary Ann frowned. "I know there's a blizzard, but I'm not sure how many more people we can handle. We went through all the food for breakfast. I had to pull out the fruit you had set aside for lunch." Bree opened the large fridge and made a mental note of what she had left. This would definitely not last more than one more day. She went into the office to call Joe at the grocery store. "Hey, can you double the order I put in last night? We're at our max capacity and we'll need more before tomorrow night." "I can do that with some items, but we had an influx of shoppers this morning. Many of our shelves are empty, and we can't get more inventory until this storm is over." Bree leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. It would be another few weeks before the food banks filled up again, and she needed whatever she could get. "Okay, I'll be there in a bit to see what you have left. I'll see what I can do before you get here." There was a pause. "Bundle up. It's bad out there. And this isn't even the worst part of the storm yet." Bree hung up and grabbed her coat. Mary Ann was finishing up with the last of the dishes when Bree left the office. "Hey, I'm running over to the store and I'm taking Xander with me. Can you hold down the fort while I'm gone?" "To be honest, no, but I'll do my best. We may have to call in a few more volunteers to help out. I've already had to stop 2 fights and throw out another guy for bringing in drugs." Bree groaned. "Ugh, was it Scott again?" "No, some newer guy. Anyway, if you have any friends on the police force, I suggest you ask them to come and help out." "I'll do my best." Bree sent out a few texts to the adults who had volunteered in the past, not wanting to have teens come out into the storm, then went to find Xander. He was helping a small family get their beds put together and stood up straight when he saw Bree walking over. "What's up? I need you and whoever else you can find to help me buy some groceries. I can't afford to pull anyone else from the shelter, so could you have a few of your friends meet us?" "Let me grab my coat. I was just invited to hang out when I get off my shift, so I'll have them come and help first." He ran to the office, and Bree looked out at the large group of people inside the shelter. A low buzz of conversation was interrupted by laughter every now and then. This was the fullest the shelter had been. The residents usually left during the day to find work, but there was no way to do that right now. She needed help. Bree stopped Andre as he walked past. "Hey, can I ask you for a huge favor?" Andre stared for a moment before answering. "What do you need?" You used to manage a call center, so I know you have the experience. I need you to do the same thing here. Make sure people have what they need, stop fights, and help out. Can you do that for me?" Bree had watched him over the time he'd been there and knew that despite the argument with Robert, Andre would make a great volunteer. He stood up straighter, and a smile lit up his face. "You want me to help?" "Yes, please. I'll even throw in an extra blanket or coat as payment. What do you say?" "Sure, I'll help out. Where do you need me?" Bree gestured toward the kitchen. "I need to run out really quick. Go tell Mary Ann that I sent you in, and she'll put you where she needs you." The look of pride that shone on his face as he walked away made Bree choke up. That's all these people needed, confidence that they could do something. Xander returned with his coat and gloves, and a few other guys he'd made friends with followed behind. Bree opened the door, hiding her face from the icy blast as she went out into the storm. Snow piled high as they trudged through the streets. The roads and sidewalks were nearly barren, and Bree felt as if she'd stepped into a dystopian novel. It was a relief to finally make it to the grocery store. Joe wasn't kidding when he said a lot of the shelves were empty. He met Bree at the door. "I grabbed what I could from your list, but there wasn't a lot of any of it." "It's fine. I'll go through and see what else I can find." Bree took a cart. "Xander, you guys start from the other side and grab whatever's easy to make. We have a lot of people to cook for." "Got it." He headed for the produce while Bree went to the other side. The bread was gone, but she picked up peanut butter and honey. She set bags of flour on the bottom of the cart, glad that she'd splurged and bought an industrial mixer earlier in the summer for times like this. Along with the food, she grabbed diapers, wipes, and a few other things for the younger children. Once she had her cart full, she headed up to the front, where Xander stood with his friends. If this storm got any worse, she'd run out of the rest of the funds she'd set aside for times like this. She had her own savings, but didn't want to touch them unless she absolutely had to do it. Joe helped them check out, and then each of them took a few plastic bags in each hand and walked back out into the storm. Bree took the last of the items and left the warmth of the grocery store. The wind bit into her face as she walked, so she ran the last block, thankful that the men were carrying the flour and sugar. The shelter was, if anything, even more packed than when she'd left. She pushed her way through the people to get back to the kitchen. Mary Ann sat at the office desk, her head buried in her arms. She looked up when she heard Bree. "There you are. Things have gotten crazier." Mary Ann rubbed her eyes. "I had to recruit a few more people to help Andre out." Bree set down the groceries. "Where did all the new people come from?" "The other shelters are rejecting newcomers, and I couldn't just let them stay out in the snow." She shook her head. "And we have another 2 days of this?" "At least." "Did you call the city about additional centers?" "What about churches? Anything?" "We can't keep filling our shelter. We're at capacity, if not over." Mary Ann frowned. No one answered. "We'll have to call again tomorrow." "Wonderful." "We'll have to do the best we can until tomorrow." "Okay, let's get cooking. Bread was gone, so we'll have to make it. Why don't you start on that, and I'll deal with the other messes. How is Andre?" Mary Ann laughed. "He takes his job seriously. There's a reason we had no full-on brawls while you were gone. He stopped them pretty fast." "Good. I hope they continue to listen. I'm going to check to see if we can get more people in here to regulate handing out clothes and blankets, and another person for the showers." Bree grabbed an apple from the fridge. "Wish me luck." "You're going to need it." Mary Ann shook her head as Bree went to the office to call the church. Reverend Olson had offered to send people if needed, and she was more than happy to take him up on the offer. Chapter 6. Robert trudged home, his hands shoved in his pockets. His temper had gotten him in trouble yet again, and it hurt worse than being on leave from his real job. He'd enjoyed working with Bree, and it had even gotten to the point where she seemed to like being around him. The snow beat at his face, but he just ignored it. Most of the stores along the streets had stayed closed since the mayor had shut everything down, and the emptiness fit his mood. He'd tried so hard to be better, but there was always that slight hint of anger hiding under the surface, something that had come from not being able to help his sister out of her situation. Just before he got to his apartment, he noticed that his favorite bar was still open. He debated between going in there or to the grocery store to get the food he'd need, and the bar won. He walked inside, surprised to see how many people were sitting at the tables. He sat down at the counter and ordered a drink, then searched the crowd. He didn't know anyone, but most of his buddies would be locked up in their apartments with a beer and a football game on TV. "So, what brings you out in this storm?" The bartender handed him the drink. "The solitude." He picked up a menu that sat on the counter nearby. "Hey, can I get a burger to go with this?" The man chuckled and took the menu from Robert. "Well, this is the perfect weather for solitude. I'll be right back with the burger." Robert sipped on his drink as he stared at his phone. He'd hoped that Bree would ask him to come back, but so far, she hadn't texted. News blared in the background, and he got snatches of the mayor warning everyone that the worst was yet to come. A woman sat down next to Robert and flashed him a smile when he looked over. She brushed a lock of bleach blonde hair behind her ear and scooted just a little closer. "You look lonely." "Not lonely, just alone." "Same thing." The woman smiled again and leaned forward. "You don't remember me, but I remember you. We met a week ago at a bar, and I never had a chance to say thank you." Robert studied her, and while she looked familiar, he couldn't quite place her. "I'm sorry, what's your name again?" "It's Gina, and you wouldn't remember it because we didn't officially meet." Her face turned red as she continued. "You stopped my boyfriend from attacking me. You saved my life that day, and I'd like to buy you a drink if that's all right." "You don't have to do that. It's what any decent person would have done." He wanted to brush off her thanks, but at some point, it was exactly what he needed to hear. Someone had appreciated what he'd done that night. Gina set her hand on his arm. "You may be right, but I haven't met a lot of decent guys in my life. It was nice to know that there are gentlemen like you out there. Maybe someday I'll find one for myself." As she climbed down off the stool, Robert reached out and took her hand. He couldn't just let her go. "You know, I think I'd like that drink." "Are you sure? I don't want to keep you." She readjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder. "I'm waiting for a burger and could use the company." He patted the chair next to him. Gina paused for a moment longer before joining him back at the bar. "So why are you really out in the storm?" "After the fight, I was put on leave until I could control my temper. I got a volunteer job at a shelter, and today I lost my temper again. They asked me to go, and I ended up here." He played with the coaster in front of him. "How about you? Why aren't you at home?" Her smile was sad as she met his eyes. "When you punched him, I took the chance and ran out the back door of the bar. All of my stuff is still at his apartment, and there's no way I'm going to get it. Even with him in jail, I just can't bring myself to go in there. And I don't have a way to get back to California, because he'd managed to get a hold of any money I've made since we were together. I'd hoped to get a job here, but they're not hiring." "I'm sorry to hear that. How long ago did he kick you out?" Robert's anger boiled under the surface, but he pushed it down. He'd already beat up the guy who had caused her pain, and he didn't need to get in trouble again. 2 days ago. I stayed at a nearby church that night and again last night. I'll probably go back there." Robert pulled a business card out of his wallet and grabbed a pen from off the counter. "Here's the address to the shelter where I've been volunteering. It's pretty full, but tell the owner I sent you. Her name is Bree. If she gives you any trouble, go to Mary Ann." A tear fell down Gina's cheek. "Thank you." "Hey, it's going to be okay. I know some people who could help you get back on your feet if you want to give New York another chance. If you don't, I understand that too." He pulled out a few $100 bills. "I'm not sure that can get you all the way to California, but hopefully it will help." She stared at the money as the bartender brought out Robert's order, then leaned forward. "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because no one deserves to deal with what you just did." Robert took a bite of the burger and savored the taste that burst in his mouth. It was the main reason he loved coming to this bar. "You know someone who dealt with this, don't you?" Her voice was soft. "My sister. She finally got away from him last year, but it took a long time for her to get to the point where she could leave him. She lived across the country and it bothered him that he hadn't been there for her. Maybe now he was just taking that anger out on everyone else." Gina watched as Robert ate. "I'm glad she got away." "Me too." Robert finished his burger and wiped his hands. "Thanks for talking. Want me to walk you to the shelter?" "No, I'm good. You should probably get home before the storm really hits. Thank you, though, for everything." She stood and zipped up her jacket. Robert held out a hand for her to shake, and she threw her arms around him. He hugged her back and pulled away. "Take care of yourself. Don't go back to him." "I won't, not this time." After throwing some cash onto the counter and waving to the bartender, Robert left the bar with Gina. "If you go that way several blocks, you can't miss it. You know, why don't I just—" "I'll be fine, I promise. Now go. It's freezing out here." Gina pulled her coat tighter and headed toward the shelter. Robert watched her for a moment before walking the last block to his building. He kicked the snow off his shoes on the doormat and took the elevator up to his apartment. The warmth welcomed him home. He changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, then grabbed his laptop. There were a few ads he could work on for now, and he wanted to make sure they were perfect. He turned the TV on to have background noise and pulled up the mock-ups for the car commercial that would start filming in a few weeks. Behaving and volunteering at the shelter had been one plan to get back into Deborah's good graces, but he also wanted to make this commercial good enough that she would beg him to come back to the agency. The blizzard rolled in later that night as Robert watched from the comfort of his couch. What had been heavy flakes before had turned into a complete whiteout from blowing snow. He hoped that no one had been caught in it. He stood and stretched to get ready for bed and watched the fury outside for a moment. It was amazing what nature could do. As he turned away, he wondered how Bree was handling things at the shelter. The heating had been fixed, but was it still working? And what about the roof? It had held up fine under the conditions of the last couple of days, but what about this? The hardware store had told him it should, but he could just check when the storm had calmed. There wasn't much he could do about it right then anyway. Robert went into his bathroom to brush his teeth, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. He sent a quick text to Bree's phone asking if things were okay and grabbed another blanket. If she needed him, he could head over. But when she didn't reply by midnight, Robert climbed in bed to read. Robert woke with a jolt. His lamp was still on, and the book he'd been reading lay on his chest. He checked his phone to see that 3 hours had passed and a text from Bree sat waiting for him. The furnace was still working, but the roof was leaking worse than it had been before, and water was pouring into the kitchen. He shoved his arms into his coat and zipped it up, then put on his gloves, hat, and scarf before grabbing the keys. He should have listened to his instincts earlier. By the time he left his apartment, at least a foot of snow had fallen, if not more. It was good that he had walked to the shelter a few times before, because otherwise he could have gotten lost. No cars were on the roads, and he could barely see the lights or street signs. The shelter was packed with people when Robert pushed his way in, accidentally knocking snow inside. He wiped off the snow and picked his way through all the sleeping bodies. A few grunted or mumbled, but didn't wake. The light in the office was on, as was the kitchen light. Robert tried the office first, but then heard voices in the other room. The scene wasn't pretty when he walked in. Xander held a mop, while Marianne, Bree, and several others he didn't know knelt on the floor, using paper towels to clean up the mess. The ovens and fridges had been pulled away from the wall so they could get at the water better. "Where can I help?" Robert grabbed whatever towels he could find. Bree looked up in surprise. "I didn't think you were coming when you didn't answer the text." "I'm sorry, I fell asleep." Robert got down on his knees to clean, but Bree shook her head. "We need to stop the leak. I sent Andre up there, but I don't think he has a clue what he's doing." Bree wrung her rag out into a bucket. "Got it." Robert searched for supplies to use up on the roof and shoved the door open in the back. Snow had piled up, and the ladder's rungs were icy as he climbed slowly up to the top. Andre had a shovel, trying to move the snow out of the way. He looked up when Robert came near, but kept digging. The wind was too loud to talk anyway. Robert groaned when he saw the cause of the problem. Sometime before the snow hit, the wind had blown off the tile he'd installed, and a chunk of the roof had gone with it. He'd have to cross roofing off his list of skills. He looked around for anything heavy. There were a few water barrels, but without something to cover the hole, they wouldn't be worth anything. The boards he'd found in the warehouse were on the ground, and he had no way to get them up unless he had rope. He lay down on the roof and looked through the hole. "Hey, Xander," he called. The cold from the ice and snow soaked into him as he lay there, but he needed to get their attention. A face moved into the view below. "Robert? Wow, I had no idea the hole was that big." "Yeah, well, the wind pulled the tile up. I need you to lift any board you can find through that hole so I can cover it as fast as you can." Xander moved out of the way, and it was a few minutes before some boards were lifted up through the hole. Robert pulled them through, and Andre took them from him. There were a couple more before Xander's face appeared. "That's all we can find. Anything else?" "How about some garbage bags?" He could use them for waterproofing. Any building inspector who came through would shut them down in a second, but it was all he could do for now. Moments later, several garbage bags were lifted up through the hole. "We'll use one down here, too." "Great idea." "Thanks." Robert stood up and laid down the bags across the hole, then used snow to help them lay flat. The shoveling Andre had done was already covered over, so they had to move snow before they could lay down the wood. Fortunately, the boards were long enough to be able to bridge over the hole without danger of sinking in. Robert trudged through the snow to pick up the water barrels he'd seen earlier, but they'd frozen to the roof. He turned to get Andre's attention, but he was already there and picked up one with only a little straining. Robert shook his head as he followed Andre back over to the water tower. He knew Andre was big, but he didn't expect him to be able to lift the barrel so easily. Andre set it on one end of the boards and went back to get another. Robert filled the first one with just enough snow to make sure it wouldn't blow away, but not enough to go crashing through the floor. Once he was finished, Robert motioned to Andre and headed for the ladder. 3 rungs from the bottom, Robert slipped and fell, jarring his leg and ankle and smacking his head on the bottom rung. Andre climbed down behind him and had to step to the side so he wouldn't land on Robert. Andre laughed as he helped Robert up and into the shelter. The last couple of steps are always the most dangerous, man. Robert stopped to take off his coat. His head pounded, and he was sure it was bleeding. His ankle was numb from the cold, but still throbbed, and his knee wasn't much better. He didn't want Bree to see him like this, but there wasn't much he could do about it. Several inches of snow had fallen while they were outside, and it was only getting worse out there. He smiled gratefully as Andre took his coat and hung it up. He touched his forehead, and his fingers came away red. "Thanks for your help up there. I couldn't have done it without you. I'm impressed with your fix. I was trying to figure out how to stop the water from going in." Andre pulled off his boots. "I just used what was lying around." Robert let Andre help him into the kitchen so he could sit. "And hey, I'm sorry about yesterday. I shouldn't have moved your stuff." "Nah, man, it was my fault." Andre slapped Robert on the back, nearly knocking him off the chair. Bree stood, still holding a towel from drying out the kitchen. Her eyes widened, and she rushed over to inspect his forehead. "What happened to you?" "Might want to put a warning on your ladder that it's slippery." As Robert warmed up, the throbbing in his ankle and knee worsened. She grabbed a paper towel and leaned close to clean the gash on Robert's forehead. Her gentle touch sent shivers of pleasure through him. "You could use some stitches, but I'm not sure it's a smart idea to go to the hospital. I can tape it shut if you're willing to let me." "I don't really want to go back out there anytime soon." Robert tried to shift on his chair and gasped in pain. Nausea washed over him, and he had to take deep breaths so he wouldn't lose his dinner. Bree backed up, her eyes wide. "Where else are you hurt?" "My ankle and knee. I twisted them on my way down." He closed his eyes. "I feel like an idiot." "An idiot who just saved us again." Bree left the room and came back with a small first aid kit. "This will hurt, but at least you won't have a huge scar." Robert held his breath, fighting the nausea as she pulled the skin together and put the bandage on it. Her lips pursed as she concentrated, showing a dimple on the side of her mouth, something he'd never noticed before. She backed up. "Okay, I think we have it. Now, which ankle?" Robert tried to move his leg to show her which one, but it hurt too much. He could feel the swelling in his knee, making the joint stiff. "If you could just grab a chair to rest it on, I'll be fine." "You don't look fine. You're pale." Marianne brought in a chair, and Robert lifted his leg onto it. Bree unlaced his boot and pulled to try to get it off, but stopped when he gasped in pain. Okay. We'll keep your boot on for the night. It's more stable than anything else we could do for it. I'll get some ice for your knee, though." Bree hurried over to the freezer to grab an ice pack. "It's a good thing you weren't planning on going home. Your ankle and knee are too swollen to move, and besides, it's too dangerous to be out there." "Yeah, I noticed." Robert tried to laugh, but he was too nauseated. "I'll just rest for a bit and head out later." "Nice try. We'll set you up in the office. It's about the only place that's left. Everywhere else is taken." She wrapped her arm around his waist and helped him stand. Andre got on the other side and led him into the office. Bree pulled out an old mattress pad and laid it next to the one that was already lying on the floor. She also took out sheets and a blanket. "You sleep here." "Thanks." Robert lowered himself down. "Did I take your place?" "That's mine beside yours, but I won't be here for a while anyway. We still have some cleaning up to do, and we need to make sure the appliances still work after the water dumped onto them. I don't look forward to tomorrow if we don't have any way to cook." Robert lay back and closed his eyes, hoping sleep would come. It had to be 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'd barely gotten any rest. But the blanket was thin, and he couldn't find a way to get comfortable. Bree came back in a few minutes later, tiptoeing over to her mat. Robert smiled as she quietly slid off her shoes. When she accidentally knocked over a garbage can as she lay down, she sighed in exasperation. "You don't have to be quiet. I'm still awake," Robert whispered. "Oh, you scared me." She scooted as far away from Robert as she could get. Robert shifted slightly, not trying to jar his leg. "Is everything working?" "Yep. The oven turned on immediately, and the fridge is humming, thank goodness. Not sure what I would do if either of them died." "That's great. Now you can sleep for a few hours." Robert grunted in pain as he readjusted his blankets. "Thankfully. Night, Robert. Night, Bree." He paused. "Where does Mary Ann sleep?" "She's with the other women. It's where she prefers to be instead of by herself in here, and it helps having someone there to keep people in line." Bree yawned. Robert chuckled. "Sounds about right. How long has she been here?" There was silence, and Robert smiled to himself. She must have fallen asleep already. Chapter 7. Bree set the cartons of orange juice on the counter and looked up to see Robert limping out of the office. She smiled and handed him an apple. "Good morning, sunshine. How did you sleep?" "I didn't." His eyes had dark rings under them, and his hair stuck out in several directions. "Where can I help? I don't want to sit around all day." He wouldn't be able to serve because he would have to stand, and it was the same for doing dishes. Bree blew a loose strand of hair out of her face. "Why don't you sit in the office where we issue clothing? There won't be much to do, but we need to make sure people get what they need." "That works for me." Robert limped toward the small room where Xander would tell him how it worked for checking out clothes. Mary Ann nudged Bree. "I see how you watch him. He's not so bad, is he?" Bree pushed back, laughing. "No, he's not. Andre told me everything they did on the roof last night to make sure snow wouldn't come in. It's a miracle they don't have pneumonia." People started lining up, so Bree and Mary Ann had to concentrate on getting everyone breakfast. Bree couldn't help that she kept glancing over to where Robert sat, laughing with Xander and a few of the men from the church. It was nice to see him relaxed and enjoying himself, finally. He was a whole new person as he joked around with the others. Robert glanced up just in time to catch her gaze and winked, making Bree's face burn. A few kids came up to him, and he talked with them, pulling a coin out of one boy's ear. "And good with kids, even better." Mary Ann ducked as Bree glared at her. "Funny. How about you get started on bread? We'll need to make several batches before lunch." But Bree couldn't help watching him with a smile on her face. The snow still hadn't let up, and it was hard to open the door by that point. They'd be stuck in here for a while, and she hoped no one else got sick. Paul was finally doing better and had even had breakfast that morning. Mary Ann headed for the back room to get the ingredients. Bree handed the next person a tray with fruit, orange juice, and a muffin. A burst of laughter brought her attention back to Robert. His story had everyone cracking up as he pretended to sprawl out on his chair. She would have loved to know what he was saying, but couldn't bring herself to go over to talk to him. Every moment she spent with him made her like him just a little more, even while he frustrated her because he was so confusing. The short temper she'd seen the day before was such a huge contrast from the light-hearted guy she saw this morning. She took the empty trays to the kitchen to wipe down so she could start lunch. The meat needed to be thawed out, and the cheese had to be sliced. Mary Ann shoved a tray of food in front of Bree's face, along with an ace bandage. "What's this for?" "You know what it's for. Go use it. He needs to get his ankle wrapped, and you're the best at it. Plus, He hasn't eaten yet." Mary Ann steered her toward the door. "Actually, neither have you." She grabbed another tray and put it in Bree's other hand. "I'll bring an ice pack out when I'm done in here." Bree glanced back at Mary Ann before walking over to Robert. Her face burned, but she knew Mary Ann was right. She set the trays down inside the clothing office and went back out to where Robert sat. "Hey, I hate to break up your comedy act, but I brought you some breakfast, and I can wrap your ankle too if your boot is bothering it." She held up the bandage. "That'd be great. It's a little tighter today, so I think the swelling is worse." He stood and Bree slipped her arm around his waist to help him into the room. One of the kids who had been talking to Robert followed them in with his chair and then ran away, giggling. Bree handed him his food and took the other tray for herself. "Sorry, it's not much, but we have to ration for now." "Hey, it looks great." He opened his orange juice and took a drink. Perfect." "I'm glad you think so. I always thought it had a little too much pulp, but it's the only brand that gets donated, so what can you do?" She took the wrapper off her muffin and took a bite. "So, what story were you telling them?" Robert grinned. "They wanted to hear how I got hurt. I may have exaggerated just a little." "A little?" She raised an eyebrow, but it explained him nearly falling out of his chair when he flopped. "Yes, I told them I was jumping from one roof to another. Much more exciting than slipping on the ladder." He started in on the fruit. "This is much better than I'd expected. These fruit cups have come a long way since I had them as a kid." Bree laughed. "Man, you're on one today. You're funnier than usual." "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Ah, that's why. I'm only funny on Thursdays, and you've just known me on the other days of the week." Bree shook her head and put her muffin down. "I give up. Clearly, I can't talk to you on Thursdays. I'll have to wait until tomorrow." "That might be wise." Robert winced as he shifted in his seat. "Is it as bad as last night?" Robert rubbed near his knee. "The ankle is worse, but I think the knee is doing better." Bree glanced up at the cut on his forehead. "We should probably change that bandage as well. I need to see if it closed up or if it needs super glue." "Yes, ma'am." Robert gasped in pain as Bree pulled off his shoe and sock. Purple bruises surrounded the swelling. "Oh, that looks great. I'll be as good as new tonight, right?" "Nope, sorry. You have at least a sprain, if not a break. We'll keep it wrapped until we can get you to the doctor." Bree wrapped the bandage around Robert's ankle, making sure it was tight enough, then secured the ends. "There. How does that feel?" Robert wiggled his toes. "Much better than my shoe did, thank you." "Perfect. Now I need you to pull your sweats up over your knee if you can. We're not going to have you put any weight on it, but I want to know where the swelling is. We can use a shirt or blanket to wrap it if we need to." Robert pulled up his sweats, cringing when he got to his knee. The swelling covered all the way around his kneecap, and there was more bruising there. "So I guess I won't be playing basketball anytime soon?" "Probably not." "Can you pull up the other one? I need to see both knees so I can check the swelling." Bree wanted to hide. Her emotions were in complete turmoil between embarrassment, trying to be professional, and doing everything she could not to fall for the man in front of her. "You just want to see my legs, admit it." He watched as she felt around both knees. Bree stood laughing. "I think you'll live. You're going to want to get it checked, but it should heal just fine. I'll go grab the stuff for your forehead and be right back." She left before he could say anything. Many people had come in with one injury or another, and she'd been able to take care of them either until they could get an appointment or the doctor made it to the shelter. But this was different. He was Robert Miller. a rather gorgeous, rich bachelor who was in the news far too often. And as much as she'd hated letting him volunteer, she knew it would be a bad day when he decided he was done. By the time she got back to Robert with the kit in hand, she'd composed herself, which completely fell apart the second he looked up and grinned at her, his eyes dancing. "Ah, there you are. I thought you were going to leave me to fend for myself." She set the kit down and put on some gloves. "I thought about it, but then we'd probably get shut down for neglect. Now hold still." "Yes, ma'am." The tape came off easily enough, and it looked like it had managed to help seal the wound. She took an alcohol wipe and cleaned around the edge of the cut, careful not to touch it. She applied the new butterfly bandage and checked to make sure it held. "We'll change it again tonight." "I'm good with that." He smiled up at her. It was another second before she realized she'd run her fingers through his hair, and she jumped back, startled. Sorry about that." "Don't be. I enjoyed it." His smile made her stomach do flip-flops. Bree cleared her throat and busied herself with cleaning up the first aid kit. She had never done something quite so insane before. "I think that's it. If you need to get back to my office to lie down, I can have Andre or Xander assist you." She gathered up the bandages and refused to meet his eyes. "I'm good here. I like talking to everyone." Bree nodded. "Okay, but if you change your mind, we can help you move." She escaped before she could say anything else and went straight for the office, where she shut the door and slid down the wall, hiding her head in her arms. What in the world had she just done? A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door before it opened. Mary Ann stood there with her arms folded. "Okay, spill. What just happened?" Bree groaned and leaned her head against the wall behind her. "I just made a complete fool out of myself." "How'd you do that?" Mary Ann sat in the chair and leaned forward, not bothering to hide the curiosity on her face. "I was helping him with the bandage on his forehead and—" Bree closed her eyes, not wanting to continue. Mary Ann grabbed her hand. "And what? You didn't kiss him, did you?" "No, I ran my fingers through his hair." She looked down at her hand. "I was cleaning the cut on his forehead, and then his hair just looked so soft, and I wondered how it felt." She fell over onto her sleeping mat. "I can never face him ever again." There was a silence for a moment before Mary Ann burst into laughter. "Oh, honey, I knew you had it bad, but I had no idea you were this far gone." "Help!" Bree's voice was muffled, but she didn't care. She had bigger problems to worry about, and she wasn't even talking about the large number of people stuck in the building. She hadn't dated because she'd had no time. And now suddenly romance had found her anyway. "Come on, lunch is about to start, so they need you." "Then I'll give you the makeover of a lifetime. At least I'll do what I can in this place, and then you'll have dinner together in here so you two can talk. You've only known each other for, 3 days, and probably know nothing about each other." Bree sat up, reality hitting. It's not like she had to date him or anything. Once he went back to work, she wouldn't have to see him again. "You're right. Thank you. I'm still completely mortified, though." They went into the kitchen where Olivia had just pulled the bread out of the oven. Bree ran the loaves through the bread slicer, while the others made sandwich after sandwich. If she could just keep concentrating on this, she could ignore the Robert incident that had just happened. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about running her fingers through his hair, especially the part where he said he'd enjoyed it. It was evident during dinner later that night that people were bored. Small skirmishes happened when people felt someone had cut in line, and a few glared at the small meal they were served. Bree sent a prayer heavenward, hoping the storm would end soon. People didn't do well being this cooped up for so long. After they had to stop a few more fights, Bree threw down the rag she'd been using to wash the counters. It's time to bring out the big guns. No! Mary Ann looked at her in horror. Yep, you know I have to do it. Bree went to a cabinet in her office and pulled out an old karaoke machine. They only used it in circumstances like this, which meant during hurricanes or other extreme weather when no one wanted to go out into the storm. The songs were oldies, but the impromptu concert still helped calm everyone's nerves and laugh at themselves. The volunteers who had been there more than a year groaned as she set it up. Once she had it ready to go, she turned it on and faced the people who sat in their beds and mats throughout the room. Okay, people, it's time to party. Who's willing to sing first? She watched the crowd as everyone stared down at their hands. She raised her eyebrows toward her volunteers until Xander sighed and stepped forward. Fine, I'll do it. He took the microphone from Bree and picked out his song. The first few notes of Brown-Eyed Girl played over the speaker, and everyone started cheering. Bree stood back by Mary Ann and watched as Xander played to the crowd. He had an amazing tenor voice that had girls swooning every time he sang. Once he was done, there were several calls for him to do another one. No, it's someone else's turn. Xander held out the microphone. Come on, who's next? A young girl with long curly hair stood. She could barely reach the top of the machine, but she found a song she wanted and waited for it to start. Jackson 5's I'll Be There played, and she belted it out. Everyone clapped along and cheered loudly when she was done. Since no one could let the girl outshine them, a line started to form so they could go next. Bree noticed that Robert had left the small office to watch the show. He had to hop to put his chair where he needed it and then sat down. Go, Mary Ann nudged her. Don't just let him sit there alone. I know. Bree went back to the office and ran her fingers through her hair, instantly thinking of doing the same thing to Robert. She shook her head and checked a mirror to make sure there was nothing in her teeth, then smoothed out the old button-up shirt she wore and made a face. She wasn't exactly the picture of glamour, but she had something he would appreciate. When she'd pulled out the karaoke machine, she'd found a set of crutches that had been left at the shelter months before and were set aside. They might be too small for his tall frame, but at least they were something until he could get better ones. With a deep breath, she walked around the edge of the room until she was next to Robert. The music was loud enough that she had to crouch down to talk in his ear. I brought you a present. His eyes lit up. Where'd you find those? Someone left them, and I'd forgotten about them until tonight. She held them out. Let's see if they'll work. He stood up and took them from Bree. They were too short, but once they were adjusted to the highest level, he was able to use them. Thanks. Now I'm going to go do something I've been wanting to all day. What's that? Go to the bathroom. He laughed and hobbled into the men's room. He definitely needed a taller set of crutches. While she waited for him to come back, she went to find an empty chair to sit next to him. Someone had figured out a way to hook their iPod to the machine, and the music had gone more contemporary. As they sang to a country song, Bree wondered what in the world she was doing sitting there. She almost got up to hide in the office, but Robert came around the corner and made his way back over. What did I miss? He set the crutches against the wall and straightened, his arm brushing up against hers. Well, there was a rousing rendition of YMCA, followed by a little Metallica. Now they've moved up a few decades. Wow, that's quite a difference in music. Was this concert thing your idea? He tapped his good foot to the music. Bree shook her head. It started long before I came here. I just carried on the tradition. I wondered how old that machine was. It looks pretty retro. You think that's retro? Check this out. Bree stood and went to the front wall to turn on a couple of spotlights, then switched off the lights. Just as the group started looking around to see what was going on, she flipped another switch and a disco ball lowered, glittering in the spotlight. A cheer rose up as Bree went back to sit with Robert. Robert stared at the ball in awe. How is there a disco ball in this place? It used to be a dance hall a long time ago, and at some point it was renovated. Mr. Olson didn't have the heart to take it out when he bought the place. Amazing! Robert watched the singing for a moment before continuing. Over the years, I've prided myself on how well my commercials have been done, and I've even received a few awards. But it's nothing compared to what you accomplish here. I mean, look at this. You know everyone in here, and you do everything you can to make them happy. What do? Make commercials about nice cars, fancy chocolates, and jewelry that's way too expensive. Bree was stunned. It was the last thing she expected to hear from him. But that's how you make your money. You make people want to buy what you're advertising. Maybe, but those commercials don't actually help anyone. He turned to face her. Do you think you could get a few of the people here to talk on camera? I want to do something different, more of a humanitarian infomercial or something, to show the service that goes on in the city. Bree stared out at the people in front of her, the people who were her family. I could try, but they might be a little embarrassed to be in a commercial. And would it even do any good? I mean, we're not exactly trying to sell something. It's not really a commercial, it's more thanking people. I could start with your group, and then for the next one, I could interview firemen or police or whoever. I'm tired of doing the same thing all the time. What a great idea! I need to make sure everyone is good with it. Bree thought of the possibilities that could come from the ad. Donations, help finding jobs for the people, among other things. Robert leaned closer, speaking quietly. You know, commercials can bring sponsors, right? And if we can find one that will pay for the spot, it's possible they'll also donate to your shelter, especially when they're looking for good PR for themselves. Bree perked up. They could use the money for sure. The grants were few and far between. But how do we find a sponsor? We get churches to help out, and a few others will donate items like the hardware store did the other day, but I don't even know where to start. That's where I can help. I know of a few places who are always looking for ways to help out, and I can sweet-talk them into doing it. But there's nothing in it for you. Why would you do it? Bree's stomach tied in knots as he stared into her eyes. He was close enough that she could see flecks of green in his eyes. This helps me because of the mess I've been in. If I can show how much I've changed, the news will leave me alone, and I'll get more clients asking for me. He leaned in until his lips were close to her ear, his breath shooting tingles through her, and she couldn't help leaning just a little closer. But I have one other advantage from doing this. What's that? The words came out quietly, her throat constricting with desire as she looked into his eyes. She glanced down at his lips, her heart pounding in her ears. He leaned forward, brushing his lips against hers, sending a thrill through her. She leaned into the kiss, forgetting the loud music and flashing lights around her. When the kiss finally ended and the world spun, Robert kissed her one more time and smiled. I'd get to spend a lot of time with you while we film. He stroked her cheek with his thumb. Bree's insides melted as she leaned in for another kiss. Sold. Chapter 8. Robert rolled over and groaned. The night had been better, but he was still stiff, and the meds had worn off by the time he woke. He sat up and noticed that Bree had left the office already. He still couldn't believe they'd kissed the night before. He'd fallen for her the first time they'd met, even though she obviously didn't want him there. And the more time they spent together, the more he knew she needed to be part of his life. Voices sounded from outside the door, which meant he should be up and helping with breakfast. He stood and pulled the crutches under his arms before leaving the room. Bree glanced over at him and blushed before going back to serving breakfast. Robert went to the kitchen to wash up. Several dishes already sat in the sink, so instead of going out to help Bree, he washed and dried them. It was awkward standing with the crutches, but it had been too hard to sit back and watch the day before. Marianne came back with another set of dishes and chuckled, "We can get you a chair, you know. You were busy, and this works just fine." He started on the bowl she'd brought in. "We could use you up front if you're willing to help. Too many bodies have become a little much for the small space. We need to make sure people wash sheets and shower, which means we'll have to let them rent the clothes from us." Robert dried his hands. "I can go out there right now." "Thank you. Just make sure the line goes quickly and everyone gets one change of clothes. You'll get people who try to go through the line more than once. Andre will make sure no fights break out." "Will do." Robert walked slowly out to the clothing office where a line had already formed. Several volunteers stood alongside the lines, guiding people to where they needed to go next. Bree stood in the office handing out clothing. She smiled at Robert as he entered. "Oh, good. I have to take care of the bedding. Just take their ID, find out their size, and then give them an outfit, towel, and soap. They'll get their ID once their rented clothing is returned." Bree rubbed her forehead. "I'm so ready for this storm to be done." Robert stared at the paper and all of the clothes. This was going to take more moving around than he'd expected. "Think I could get someone to help in here? I can do the ID stuff, but I need someone else to grab the clothes." "Right, I should have thought of that. I'll get one of the ladies from the church." Bree left the room, and Robert turned to the man standing in front of him. "Size?" He took the man's ID and set it in the index box. The man stared at the cupboards behind Robert. "I'll need an extra large. And do you have any razors? I didn't get one when I first got here." Robert turned to see if he could find a basket that held razors. "I'm not sure. I'll have to ask Bree. Oh, wait. Here's a pink one." "Whatever." The man took the items and left for the shower. A woman came in and smiled at Robert. "I'm Cassie. Bree said you needed help?" "Nice to meet you. I'm Robert." He shook her hand. "You're getting the clothes for me? And hopefully you know where men's razors are, because I haven't found them yet." She pulled a basket off the shelf just to Robert's left. "They're here." "Good to know." Robert continued to hand out the items as Cassie pulled them off shelves. Just past the line, he could see Bree instructing those who had showered to take the sheets and blankets off their beds. There were a few who grumbled, but for the most part they listened and tossed the dirty ones into a pile. Marianne would then scoop them up and head back to where Robert assumed the washer stood. It was nearing lunch when the door to the shelter opened. Snow blew in as a small woman walked in. She held one arm to her side as she looked around, keeping her hood over her face. Robert tensed, knowing something was wrong. When her hood slipped, he recognized Gina from the bar. He jumped up, jarring his knee. Gasping in pain, he grabbed his crutches and hobbled out of the office as quickly as possible. "Hey, where are you going?" Cassie called out, but Robert ignored her as he made his way to the woman. Gina bit her lip and reached for the door. "Hey, wait!" Robert was almost to her when she met his eyes. "I've been wondering where you... What happened to you?" Gina pulled her hood forward to hide the black eye and bruises on her face. "I shouldn't have come." "I'm glad you did. Did your boyfriend do this?" Robert wanted to wrap an arm around her and guide her to a chair, but he had to hold on to his crutches. She nodded as her lips trembled. "He found me." "I'm so sorry. Come in. We'll get you cleaned up and find a place for you." He found Bree staring at the two of them and gestured to her. Bree looked between them as she came over. When she got closer, her hand flew up to her mouth. "Do you need help?" Gina glanced over at Robert before answering. "I need a place to stay, but I can go if there's no room." "We're full, but I'm not about to let you out like this. Come to the office and we'll get you cleaned up." Bree went to put her arm around Gina's shoulders, but jerked back when Gina gasped in pain. "Oh dear, we need to get you to a doctor." "No." Her voice was emphatic, her movements stiff as if she would run at the slightest movement. Bree frowned. "Your arm is most likely broken, and you need stitches in that cut. That bump on your forehead is swollen, and it's possible you might have a mild concussion. I can only do so much here." "I'll be fine. I just needed to go somewhere, and Robert told me about this place." Robert watched them go, anger boiling beneath the surface. Even after all he'd done, she'd still had a run-in with her boyfriend. He hadn't been able to protect her. He shook his head and stared out at the storm. Where was the guy who had done this? Was he out there right now looking for her? Or was he too drunk to know what he'd done? The crutches made him too slow to follow Bree and Gina, so he set them against the wall and did his best to limp toward the office. He was pretty sure the ankle wasn't broken, but it didn't keep him from grunting every time he took a step. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Andre grabbed Robert's arm. "Are you trying to mess your knee up even more?" He handed Robert the crutches. Robert opened his mouth to argue, but swallowed instead. "I just needed to check on Gina. You won't do her any good if you can't walk." Andre's piercing stare made Robert shiver. "Fine. Got it. I'll use the crutches," Robert muttered. He found Gina and Bree in Bree's office. Gina held ice to her forehead while Bree worked on bandaging the other arm. Seeing that everything was being taken care of made Robert relax. "Think it's broken?" He clenched his jaw. "By the way she was holding it to her chest, I'm pretty sure it is." Bree glanced up at Robert. "Looks like you'll have company as soon as it's clear enough to make it to the hospital." He chuckled. "Looks like it." Bree straightened. "Robert, can I talk to you in private?" "Sure." "Andre, go find Marianne and have her help Gina find some clothes and a place to sleep, if there's any space left." Andre nodded and guided Gina out into the hallway. Then Robert turned to Bree. She gestured for him to shut the door before she said anything. "Is it true? About the bar?" She folded her arms, hugging herself. Robert raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" "She told me you were defending her that night. Is that true?" Her voice got softer as she spoke. "Yes, it's true." Robert felt a need to protect Gina as Bree studied him. He didn't want to give anything away that Gina didn't want Bree to know. Her head dropped. "I owe you an apology." "No, yes." She cut him off. "I do. I've seen you in trouble often enough that I just assumed you were exactly what you were portrayed to be. And it's been hard letting go of those feelings, which I realize is bad to say after we shared that kiss last night." He caressed her cheek, wanting to wipe away the guilt he saw there. "You couldn't have known. And it's not like I've done my best at staying out of trouble. You had every reason to believe what you did. I just hope I've done everything I can to show who I really am. 1,000 times over." Bree took a step closer, staring into his eyes as she ran her fingers through his hair. Robert leaned forward and brought his lips to hers, grateful that she finally saw him for who he was. Bree wrapped her arms around his neck, almost knocking him off balance, with a passion that surprised him. Robert enjoyed the feel of her arms around him as they kissed. Bree shifted a little to come closer, but jarred Robert's knee. He pulled away and collapsed in the chair behind him. "Oh, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Bree grabbed the other chair in the office and helped him set his leg up on it. "I'll go get some ice." The throbbing reverberated in his brain, but he didn't want her to leave. It was the first time she'd finally let her guard completely down, and he wasn't about to let her go. He took her hand and tugged her toward him so he could continue the kiss. Bree knelt next to him and touched the cut on his forehead, ran her fingertips down his face, then leaned forward so her lips could meet his. Robert could think of nothing but her as he lost himself in the feel of her hands trailing along his shoulders and arms. The knock at the door was muted, but it made Bree jerk away. She jumped to her feet and cleared her throat before going to the door. She whispered back and forth for a bit before turning to Robert. "Mary Ann was able to get through to a doctor in her congregation. He just arrived. So I'm going to see what he can do for you, Gina, and whoever else needs help. Go. If it's okay, I'm going to stay in here. I don't think my leg is going to let me walk on it much more." She cringed. "Sorry about that." "Don't be. This was my fault. And don't forget to have him check on Paul. He sounds better, but I'm not sure he's out of the woods yet." Robert couldn't help his annoyance that it had taken this long for medical help to show up. "I'll be sure he's checked on first." She leaned down and kissed him before leaving the room. Robert moved from the chair down to his mat to rest. It'd be a while until they got to him, and he was lightheaded from pain. Maybe he shouldn't have tried to walk without crutches. The doctor taped up the cut on Robert's forehead and leaned back. "Looks like this is healing well. Bree did a good job. You'll still need to go in and get your knee and ankle checked. I'm not entirely convinced that the ankle isn't broken." Robert rubbed his knee where it was sore. "I'll go in as soon as the snow stops. Thanks for coming." "No problem. I'm happy to help." The doctor stood and shook Robert's hand. "Well, I think I'm done here. Off to my next stop. I guess the blizzard didn't get you out of work then." The doctor chuckled and shook his head. "No, I've worked overtime this week. This isn't the only shelter that's packed like this." Robert watched as the doctor left, and he stood to check up on Gina. He found her talking to Mary Ann near the kitchen. She stood and smiled as he came near. "Hey, what did the doctor say?" Robert asked. "I'll be fine. The bump on my forehead is going to give me a nice black eye, and my arm is probably broken. But it could have been worse." She paused. "If you hadn't told me about this place—" "Well, we're here to protect you. He won't touch you here." She nodded. "I believe that. The doctor promised to send someone to his apartment to arrest him. That is, if he's actually there. Usually after doing something like this, he disappears for a few days." Robert frowned. "Any idea where he goes?" "No, I've never bothered to find out." She yawned. "Wow, I'm more tired than I thought." Mary Ann put an arm around her and guided her toward the women's section of the shelter. "It's late. Let me show you where you'll sleep tonight." Bree stepped up next to Robert. "You should get some sleep, too. I see those rings under your eyes, even if you insist that you're fine." "You don't miss anything, do you?" Robert laughed. "Fine. I'm heading there right now." Bree turned off the main lights and followed Robert to the office. She picked up her blanket and pillow, then slid her mat next to Robert's. "There. Now you can have more space to sprawl out. Maybe your knee won't hurt as much. But this is your mat and your office. I can leave." He tried to get up, but she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm going into the kitchen. You need the space, and I need to start food for tomorrow morning anyway." She laid his blanket on him. "Night, Robert. If you need me, shoot me a text." Robert watched her go and rolled onto his side, trying to get comfortable. He had to admit that having the extra space was definitely nicer for his knee. He picked up his phone and pulled up his texts, then typed, "Hey, I need you." A minute later, Bree opened the door. "Already?" "You forgot to kiss me goodnight." "Oh, and I need a drink of water." He grinned as she rolled her eyes. "Please." "Fine, 1 sec." She left and came back with a glass. "Did you want some ibuprofen with this?" "No, I have another hour or two." He took it from her and drank the water before handing the glass back. "Now, about that kiss." Robert ran his fingers through his hair a few times to make sure it wasn't sticking out, then opened the door of the office. Bree and a few other volunteers served breakfast, while Mary Ann was in the back cleaning up. Robert set his crutches to the side of the sink and leaned against the counter. "Sorry you had to do this. I should have been out here hours ago." "You needed the sleep. Besides, we did mostly paper plates and bowls today, so there's not much to do anyway," Mary Ann said. Robert took the cloth from her and dried the large serving bowl she'd just washed. "What about lunch?" "Already in the oven." She handed him another bowl. "The snow stopped sometime during the night. There's several feet, but at least we won't get any more." "Seriously? I thought we had another day." "I did too." Mary Ann started the washer. "If Bree needs me, I'll be checking bathrooms, etc." "All right." Robert took his crutches and made his way out to the front. He wanted to see the streets now that it had stopped snowing. The wind still blew, but the plows were out. Other city workers shoveled the walks so that people could get to where they needed to go. The city had come alive again. Bree came up next to him, her arms folded as she watched the activity outside. "Can I just say how thrilled I am that this stopped sooner than expected?" "Sure, and I completely agree. I need to get my ankle x-rayed to assess the damage and then get home so I can do some work. I'm hoping I can get my job back soon. I want to go over ideas for the commercials we discussed the other night." "About those, do you really think they'll help?" She met his eyes. Robert nodded. "Anything to get publicity for the shelter is good. I'm hoping they'll get you some grants so you can get the repairs you need." "That would be amazing." Bree stood watching the plows for a moment before turning to go. "We need to start moving people soon. Think you can take handing out supplies for another day? People are going to want to check on their families or look for jobs. Unless you want to get back to your job right now. I can help before I go." Robert paused. "Thank you for the chance to help me. I know you were taking a huge risk hiring me when you did." Bree was silent for a moment. "You're welcome. Turns out it was the best thing I could have done." Robert leaned forward and kissed her. "I have to agree with you." She smiled and kissed him back. "Now go. People are staring." "Let them." He leaned in one more time before heading over to the clothing. He was anxious to get through this before heading back to Silverscript. He had some exciting ideas to talk about with Deborah. Chapter 9. Bree sighed as the last group of people left the shelter. A light snow continued to fall, but it didn't stop the city from waking and going about its business. She stretched and pulled sheets off beds while listening to Christmas music on the radio. "Think we'll have a big lunch crowd?" Mary Ann scooped up a pile of sheets. "I doubt it. We can have bread ready in case, but I doubt we'll see them until dinner tonight." Bree took her load into the laundry room and started the washing machine. Bree's thoughts drifted to Robert. He'd left with everyone else, promising he'd let her know what the doctor said as soon as he was done. Gina left with him, shaking at the thought of leaving the shelter. Jealousy and concern warred in Bree's mind as she thought about the woman who had come in the day before. She wanted the best for Gina, but she wished Robert wasn't so protective of her. What if he decided he liked her more than Bree? She shook her head. That was ridiculous. They'd only admitted their feelings to each other 2 days before, and they'd only known each other for a week. That was hardly anything to get excited about. Making a list for what she needed was nearly impossible at this point, because Joe had already mentioned that he wouldn't be able to stock up anytime soon. So Bree decided to take inventory of what they had at the shelter. She grabbed a few roasts from the freezer and set them on the counter to thaw. She could cook them overnight for soup the next day. Making bread had helped a lot, and she'd get started on another batch soon. She wrote out directions for the volunteers and went to find her coat. Mary Ann stood in the kitchen when Bree was ready to leave. "Hey, I'm trying a couple of the other stores to get some more groceries. Directions are on the fridge. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Need any help?" Mary Ann finished kneading some bread dough and straightened. Bree shook her head. "I'll have them deliver. Besides, I need you to make sure you're here in case people come back." "I'll start on the list as soon as I get the bread in the oven. I won't be here tomorrow. I got called back for an interview." Her grin lit up her face. "That's great! I knew they'd love you." Bree gave her a quick hug. "I'll have Olivia and Xander here tomorrow, so we should be fine until you get back. Anyway, I'd better take off so I can get back for dinner." Bree went the 4 blocks to a different grocery store, but the sight was about the same as Joe's. The shelves were empty, and people moved through the aisles with their carts. She sighed and grabbed what she could before going to checkout. She handed the cashier her personal credit card, cringing as the total continued to rise. Her cell phone rang as she left the store. "Hello? Hey, beautiful. Have you made it out of the shelter yet?" Robert's husky voice made Bree's pulse race. "As a matter of fact, I just left the grocery store. How'd the appointment go?" Bree pushed the button for the crosswalk. "My knee is fine, just sore, but my ankle is broken, and I barely escaped needing surgery on it." Bree cringed. "I was afraid that was the case. It's a good thing Andre stopped you from walking on it." Robert laughed. "Huh, no kidding. Listen, I was wondering if you could meet me for lunch. I know things are crazy there, but I'm almost guessing that you haven't eaten yet today." "I'd love to, but I have to track down some groceries before tomorrow." "I can help with that. I called around and found a place in New Jersey that was willing to donate some of what they had in their warehouse. They'll be there in a couple of hours." Bree froze as she reached for the door to the shelter. "How did you find them?" "They supply the lunchroom for the agency. It took a few calls, but I found the person to contact, and they were more than happy to help out. They had some surplus because of the storm, so it's helping them as well." "Thank you, again. I'll call you later when I can get away. And Robert, I owe you big time." Bree set the groceries on the counter. "Just go out to dinner with me, and we'll call it even." Robert laughed and ended the call. Bree checked herself in the mirror one more time before leaving her bathroom. When Mary Ann had found out that Robert asked Bree to dinner, she'd practically shoved her toward the door, promising everything would be under control. Since Robert was stuck with crutches, they'd agreed to meet at Robert's apartment, and that scared her more than anything else. Bree slipped her coat on and left her apartment, grateful for the warm boots she'd bought at the start of the season. Snow was still piled up along the sidewalks, and she could see her breath as she walked to the subway. Robert had offered to send her a taxi, but after everything else he'd done for her, she'd insisted on taking the subway. The train car was full of people going about their business, and while it was usually stifling to her, she loved knowing things were back to normal. She followed the directions to his apartment and stared up at the modern architecture. Part of her wanted to run from the place, but she forced herself to push the button. The door unlocked, and she walked in to take the elevator. When the door opened to the penthouse, she stared. She told Mary Ann what she pictured the apartment to look like. But this was far beyond what she'd expected. "There you are. I was beginning to worry about you." Robert helped her with her coat and hung it on a rack next to his door. "This place is amazing." She smiled at the fireplace in the living room. At least she'd been right about that when she'd first met him. He leaned forward and kissed her. "Thank you. The kitchen is this way." Bree followed him as she stared at the living room. "Did you just move in? There's not much here." "About a month ago. Want a drink?" Bree shook her head. "I'm good. I see you got better crutches." "Yeah, these are actually tall enough. I have your other ones in my closet. I can bring them when I'm off these." He pulled out 2 plates and limped over to the counter. "I wish I could have made this a little more romantic with candles and everything, but I can only do so much on these things." "It's perfect." She scooted the food closer to them. "Sit. I can get the rest." "Thank you." Robert sat and rubbed his knee. "Much better." Bree dished out the spaghetti onto each of their plates and set the pan back on the stove. "So, have you talked to Silverscript yet? Are they letting you come back?" Robert shrugged. "I have an interview on Monday and we'll go from there. I'm hoping to be rid of these crutches and into a boot by then." "So soon?" "I had a great nurse who kept it wrapped for a few days." He winked at Bree. "The swelling has gone down enough that the doctor is pretty sure I can get into a boot soon. But that means I have to behave myself. We'll see how long that lasts." "I give it a day." Bree laughed. Robert grinned. "You know me too well." Once dinner was done, Bree did the dishes while Robert told her about how Gina's boyfriend had been caught and was now sitting in jail. Gina was able to get her things from his apartment and would be heading back to California for the holidays. Bree finished and dried her hands. They moved into the living room and settled onto the couch. Robert wrapped his arms around Bree and pulled her close. They watched the light flakes fall outside the windows as Bree finally let the stress from the last few weeks melt away. "I have to say this is the perfect way to spend a wintry December evening." Robert kissed her cheek. "I agree completely. I have something for you." Bree sat up so she could face him, warmth spreading through her. "You didn't have to get me anything." "I did, though. When I saw this, I knew you needed it." He pulled out a small box with a bow. "But it's not even Christmas yet." Bree took the box from him and ran her fingers along the bow. The giddiness she felt reminded her of Christmas morning as a child. Robert laughed. "I want you to open it now. I've been waiting to give it to you, and I want to see what you think." Bree settled back into his arms and pulled the lid off. Nestled inside was a charm bracelet. She pulled it out and stared at the small charms before Robert took the bracelet and put it around her wrist. "I know you don't wear a lot of jewelry, but this one is different. See this snowflake? That's because of the blizzard. The mug was because we love the same kind of hot chocolate. While I couldn't find a disco ball, they did have a microphone for the best night of karaoke I've ever had to live through. This roll of toilet paper or paper towels or whatever it is reminded me of going shopping with you. And of course, this Band-Aid reminds me of how you had to nurse me back to health." "It wasn't exactly nursing you back to health, but I have to admit, I'm pretty awesome at bandaging ankles and foreheads." Bree held up a key. "What's this one for?" Robert stroked her cheek, then tipped her chin so their noses nearly touched. "It's because you hold the key to my heart." Epilogue, 6 months later. Bree snuggled in next to Robert on the couch in the newly renovated shelter. Silverscript Ad Agency had decided if they were going to feature the shelter, it needed some redecorating, and they'd convinced some of their clients to pitch in as well. Mary Ann, Xander, and Andre sat on another couch, arguing over who got to hold the popcorn bowl. It was the perfect way to watch the commercial. "Hey, shh, it's on!" Mary Ann leaned forward and turned the volume higher. Music led into the infomercial, and Bree's eyes filled with tears as she listened to what each of the people had to say. Robert hadn't allowed her to hear this part when they recorded, wanting to keep it a surprise. Each of the tenants talked about their stay at the shelter, and it warmed her heart knowing the difference she'd been able to make in their lives. As it ended, Bree noticed the silence in the room as the others had to wipe their eyes. Robert squeezed Bree closer to him and kissed the top of her head. "What did you think?" he asked. "It was beautiful, thank you." She kissed him and laughed when the others groaned. Mary Ann threw a pillow at them. "Come on, you two, there are other people in the room." Bree stood and hugged Mary Ann, and then moved on to the others. "You guys, I don't even know what to say." "It's all true, except the part where I said your cooking is the best. I'm pretty sure that's mine." Mary Ann hugged her again. "But seriously, Robert, that was fantastic." "Thanks. We start filming the next one in a few days." Robert took Bree's hand in his. Mary Ann opened the lid on the cake in front of them. "Who's next on the list?" "We'll be focusing on doctors next, starting with the ones who volunteer at shelters. I figured the best way to keep this going is to build out from this one." Robert shifted from one foot to the other. Bree pulled out the envelope she'd been saving and handed it to Robert. "Open it." "What is it?" Robert opened the letter inside and scanned it, his eyes widening as he read. "Are you sure?" "You know I need a partner to keep this place going, and I'd hope you'd be willing to take the position." Bree searched Robert's face, hoping he would agree. She'd gone through a lot of paperwork to put it in both of their names. All it needed was his signature. Robert pulled out a pen and signed his name with a flourish. "There's nothing I'd rather be doing." Bree wrapped her arms around him and kissed him, earning more groans. She pulled away and wiped her tears. "This has to be the best day ever." "Oh, hey, that reminds me." Robert pulled out a gift. "Another charm?" Bree couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. He'd given her a charm for each month they dated, each one marking a special moment in their lives. "You can't tell me you knew we were going to be partners." Robert winked. "You'll never know." "Okay, close your eyes because I'm really excited about this one." Bree shook her head and closed her eyes, holding out the arm with her bracelet. Her breath caught seconds later, when instead of attaching the charm to her bracelet, Robert slipped something onto her finger. Her eyes flew open and found a gold ring with a large circled diamond in the center. Robert knelt on one knee in front of her. "Bree Matthews, will you marry me?" "Yes, yes, 1,000,000 times yes." The end. This has been Another Chance for Love, written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by P.J. Wood.